Most people are walking around with powerful tools inside their mind they have never even noticed. You are not stuck. You are just running default settings that were never optimized. This video is not about motivation or morning routines. It is about the invisible switches buried deep in your psychology that can quietly change how you think, feel, decide, and act. These are not surface-level hacks. These are the strange mental exploits that work behind the scenes. And once you know them, you cannot unsee them. So let's get into secret mind hacks no one talks about. But before that, drop a quick comment and let us know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. It's amazing how we're all connected, each of us chasing that perfect night's sleep. If this resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Restwise, and join the journey. The anti-self. You ever catch yourself stuck in your own head, spinning the same problems over and over like a broken record? You think about what's going wrong, why you're stuck, and somehow you feel even more trapped. What if I told you the real problem isn't the situation? It's you trying to solve your problems with the exact same version of yourself who created them. That sounds wild, but listen. Your brain is wired in a way that makes this a trap. You have one mental self. Call it your usual mindset, your identity, and it's always battling to fix problems from inside itself. But here's the catch: it's limited by the same habits, fears, and blind spots that caused the issues in the first place. Now imagine if you had a secret weapon, a mental avatar, like a version of yourself who doesn't get stuck in the same loops. This isn't some sci-fi fantasy or wishful thinking. This is a real psychological hack that can help you break free from mental ruts. Picture this avatar as your anti-self, a distinct, deliberate mindset you create in your imagination that is specifically designed to tackle your problems with fresh eyes and zero emotional baggage. It's like having a mini you who is calm, clear-headed, and brutally honest. The part of you that doesn't overthink, doesn't get paralyzed by fear, and actually knows how to cut through mental noise. Here's the shocker. Your brain actually responds when you do this. Studies show that imagining yourself from a third-person perspective, literally seeing yourself from the outside, activates parts of the brain linked to self-control and emotional regulation. When you build this anti-self avatar and talk to it, you're shifting how your brain processes stress and decision-making. You're rewiring those old pathways that kept you stuck, creating new ones where you can think logically instead of reacting emotionally. And the wild part, your brain can't fully tell the difference between an imagined scenario and reality, so it treats this mental exercise as real training. Think about the last time you got overwhelmed and felt helpless. You probably ruminated, doubted yourself, maybe even panicked. But now, imagine sitting down with your anti-self, the calm, problem-solving version of you, and asking, what would you do right now? How would you see this differently? This mental avatar doesn't get weighed down by anxiety or past failures. It looks at the problem like a strategist, breaking it into small pieces, figuring out which move makes the most sense next. This method actually makes sense when you consider how humans evolved to handle complex social situations. We naturally use perspective-taking, imagining how others see us, to regulate our behavior. The anti-self trick flips this inward, so you're using that same skill to step outside your own emotional turmoil. Instead of being trapped inside your feelings, you're observing them like an outsider and responding with clarity. Here's why so many people miss this. They think their mind is a single, fixed entity. But your identity is fluid. You can shift between different selves depending on context. You do this all the time without realizing, like when you act differently around friends versus at work. The anti-self is just a deliberate version of that shift. By intentionally crafting this mental avatar, you create a new internal dialogue that challenges your default reactions and habits. I want you to try something right now in your mind. Picture a version of yourself who is fearless in the face of uncertainty. This version doesn't waste energy doubting or complaining. It's not distracted by what could go wrong or what others might think. Instead, it focuses on one thing. What's the next smart move? How do I get closer to a solution step by step? This is your anti-self. Not a superhero, not perfect, just a more resourceful you. The beauty of this technique is it's always with you. You don't need a therapist, a guru, or a new app. You simply tap into this alternate self anytime your mind is stuck. And here's the key, because this avatar exists inside your imagination, you control its beliefs, tone, and mindset. You decide if it's calm or assertive, gentle or tough. You make it the perfect problem solver tailored to your unique challenges. Most importantly, this works because it rewires your brain's emotional response. When you talk to your anti-self, you break the automatic negative feedback loop that usually makes problems feel bigger than they are. Instead, you get a fresh perspective that's clear and action-oriented. It's like switching from a blurry, fogged-up mirror to a clean one that shows exactly what needs fixing. And what if this mental avatar could grow over time? Each time you practice, it gets stronger, more confident, and better at handling your problems. Eventually, this version of you becomes the default problem solver inside your head. That's when the real magic happens. Because the parts of your brain that used to freak out start deferring to your anti-self's calm, strategic thinking. You're not just coping anymore, you're mastering your mind. So the next time you hit a wall, don't just try harder with the same mindset that got stuck. Build your anti-self, talk to it, argue with it, learn from it. This secret mind hack isn't about escaping reality. It's about upgrading how you interact with it. And once you do, you'll wonder how you ever got through tough times without it. Chronesthesia. Have you ever caught your mind drifting into the past or fast-forwarding into the future like you were watching your life on a screen, that weird jump, where suddenly you are not here anymore, you are somewhere else, back at that awkward conversation, or ahead, imagining yourself killing it on some big stage? That is not random. That is a built-in feature of your brain, and it has a name. Chronesthesia, the ability to mentally time travel. Most people have no idea they are doing it. Even fewer realize they can control it. But when you learn how to hack this mental time travel button, everything changes. You stop being a prisoner of regret. You stop being paralyzed by future fear. Instead, you start moving through time with purpose. You start using your mind like a movie director. You do not just replay the scene, you rewrite it. Here is the wild part. The same part of your brain that helps you remember the past also builds your idea of the future. It is your hippocampus, but it is not just a filing cabinet for memories. It is more like a simulation engine. It creates alternate versions of reality. It does this all the time. You imagine what might happen in a job interview. You replay what you should have said in an argument. That is chronesthesia in action. You are building emotional blueprints for time that does not even exist yet. And your brain does not just see these timelines. It feels them. This is the shocker. Your nervous system responds to imagined scenarios almost the same way it does to real ones. Picture a future where you fail and your body starts tightening up. Picture a future where you succeed and suddenly you breathe deeper. Dopamine kicks in. Confidence grows, all from a simulation your brain is treating like the real thing. This is not just psychology talk. This is evolutionary design. We survived by anticipating threats and replaying what went wrong so we could avoid repeating it. But now, instead of getting chased by lions, we are getting chased by our own thoughts. Because here is what happens. Your brain wants to protect you. But if you keep traveling to a negative future or a painful past, your brain builds those routes into highways, and that becomes your default setting. You start seeing everything through that lens. You doubt yourself before you even try. You hesitate because you saw it go wrong in your head first. That is how people get stuck. Not because the present is impossible, but because the past and future they are mentally living in are broken. But here is the good news. You can change the timeline. Start with your past. Go back to a moment that hurt, not to relive it, but to re-see it. View it like a director watching footage. You are not the actor anymore. You are behind the camera. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What did I survive? What would I tell the version of me in that moment? Just that shift takes you from victim to author, from trap to free. Now jump forward. Picture a version of your future where you are doing exactly what you hope to do. Speak it out loud. See it clearly. Do not just think success. Feel it. Your brain starts linking that emotion to action. This is not delusion. This is direction. Athletes do this. Performers do this. Anyone who wins does this. They live it in their mind first. This is why when people say visualize, they are not talking fluff. They are talking neural training. The more vivid your mental future, the stronger the signal your brain sends to your body to make it real. It is like mental rehearsal, but it is deeper because it builds belief, and you do not need hours of meditation to do it. Just micro moments. Before a decision, before a habit, before you quit, ask, what does my future self want me to do right now? How will I feel tomorrow if I choose differently today? That question alone rewires your emotional compass. Chronesthesia is not just about escaping. It is about expanding. When you use it with intention, you stop being pulled by old stories and start being guided by new ones. You can reshape your identity. You can rewrite your motivation. You can look at your timeline and say, I am not just passing through this life. I am authoring it. So the next time your mind jumps to a past you regret or a future you fear, do not shut it down. Step into it. Look around. Change something. Say something new. Act like the version of you who already knows what to do. Because the truth is you are already a time traveler. The real question is what kind of future are you building every time you go there? Uncanny Loop. Say a word out loud right now. Any word. Let us say the word apple. Now say it again. Apple. Again. Apple. Keep going. Apple. 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 Say it 10 times in a row. What happens? It starts to sound weird, right? The meaning slips. It feels like you are just making noise with your mouth. That is called semantic saturation, and it is one of the strangest little glitches in your brain. Because for a moment reality flickers. Something that made sense a second ago turns alien. Like the word folds in on itself. This is the uncanny loop, and it is more than a party trick. It is a secret doorway into how your mind constructs meaning in real time. The reason this happens is wild. When you repeat the same word again and again your brain stops processing it like a message and starts treating it like a sound pattern. The connection between the sound and the concept begins to dissolve. This is your brain's way of tuning out repetitive signals, like how you stop noticing background noise after a while. Except now you are glitching your own language. Your sense of what the word means starts to unravel. And here is the part that will mess with your head. This little moment of confusion actually reveals how fragile your sense of reality is. Because words are not just labels. They are symbols your brain uses to organize your entire experience. When you say apple, you do not just hear the sound. You see the fruit. You taste the crisp bite. You maybe even picture a memory of a kitchen or a grocery store, or that time you dropped one in front of your crush. All of that is wrapped into one simple word. But when that word loses meaning, the scaffolding collapses. You see the cracks. You notice how much of your mental world is held together by repetition and habit. This is not just a linguistic quirk. It is a mirror into how your mind processes identity, memory, and reality. It is your internal simulation engine short-circuiting for a second. And this can go way deeper. The uncanny loop does not only apply to language. It applies to thoughts. Think a belief over and over, and it hardens into something automatic. But if you repeat that belief too much with awareness, it can suddenly feel strange. You start questioning it. You start realizing maybe it is not absolute. That is where real transformation starts. When the loop breaks and something new slips in, you can use this hack on purpose. Take a belief that is holding you back. Maybe something like "I am not good enough." Now repeat it out loud, over and over. I am not good enough. I am not good enough. Do it until it sounds weird, until it loses grip. What just happened is your brain started detaching from the emotional weight of the phrase. You gave your nervous system a moment of space, a chance to see it as just noise, not truth, just a loop. The power here is that you are disrupting your brain's autopilot. Most of your thoughts run on tracks built by repetition. They become invisible because they are so familiar. But once you break the loop, you make room for new wiring. You open up mental flexibility, and that is what rewires reality. There is also something eerie and beautiful about this. When meaning falls apart, it creates silence. In that gap, your brain looks for new connections. This is where insight lives. This is where creativity and change sneak in. You have probably felt this during meditation or intense focus. That moment when a word or idea just drifts away and you feel wide open. That is the uncanny loop doing its thing. Breaking structure to make space. And here is a tease for your curiosity. If a single word can fall apart and scramble your sense of reality, what does that say about everything else you believe? Everything you think is true is just a structure built out of repetition. That can be terrifying, or it can be the most freeing thing ever, because it means you can rebuild from scratch. Choose new loops. Speak new meaning into existence. So next time you find yourself spiraling in a thought loop, pause. Say it again and again. Watch it dissolve. Use the weirdness. Let it shake you a little, because in that strange moment your brain is handing you the keys to rewrite your internal reality. The meta loop. You ever notice your own thoughts? Not just think, but actually notice that you are thinking, like your mind is turning the camera back on itself. That strange double awareness. That is the meta loop. Most people have never heard of it, but they experience it. It is that moment when you are angry, but you are also aware that you are angry, or you are nervous, and there is a part of you watching the nervousness happen. It sounds small, but it is a total shift in power, because once you are aware of awareness itself, you are no longer trapped inside it. Think about how most people live. Thought, feeling, reaction, loop. Something happens, you feel something, then you respond without thinking about it. That is the first loop. But when you zoom out and see the pattern, you have entered the meta loop. You are not just reacting, you are watching the machine run. Here is the shocker. Most of your thoughts are not facts. They are habits, reactions, mental echoes that just bounce around all day, but your brain treats them like truth. Unless you catch it in the act. That moment you realize you are thinking. That is the doorway out of autopilot. And it is not just some meditation trick. Neuroscience backs it. When you activate meta-awareness, different regions of your brain light up, the ones linked to decision-making, emotional regulation, focus, and they stay active longer. Because you are not just reacting anymore. You are choosing. Imagine being in a fight with someone. You feel the heat rising. The old patterns kick in. You want to yell or shut down or storm off. But then you hear the voice in your head say, I am getting triggered. I do not have to react. That is the meta loop. Right there. You stepped out of the story. You started writing a new one. And here is the beautiful part. You can practice this like a skill, just like a muscle. Every time you catch yourself in a thought, a reaction, a spiral, just pause. Say in your head, I am noticing this. That simple move shifts you from being the thought to watching the thought, from being the emotion to observing it. Now let us go deeper. You can even become aware of the voice that is aware, like a mirror looking into another mirror. This is where the loop folds in on itself. Some people fear that space, think they will get stuck in analysis. But it is not overthinking. It is under-identifying. You stop believing every thought is you. You start choosing which ones deserve your energy. It does not take hours of meditation. It takes seconds. In the middle of a craving, in the middle of a doubt, in the middle of a bad decision forming, you say, what is happening in my mind right now? Who is watching this? That question cracks the loop. It resets your internal compass. And the effect is unreal. People who build strong meta-awareness make faster recoveries from emotional spirals. They become less reactive, more grounded, more creative, because they are not stuck running the same program over and over. They are editing the code as it runs. This works for beliefs too. You can notice a story you have about yourself, like I always mess things up. And instead of arguing with it, you just notice it. Oh, there is that belief again. I am watching it happen. That space between you and the thought. That is where transformation happens. You are no longer the voice. You are the awareness behind it. This is not about being robotic. It is about being awake. You still feel everything. You just stop letting the first reaction run the whole show. You give yourself options, and that changes your entire mental landscape. And once you get good at this, it gets even better. You start using the loop on purpose. You wake up, you check your mind, you guide your focus, you catch bad loops before they lock in. You shape your attention like clay. That is not just awareness. That is mastery. So the next time your mind spins, do not panic. Do not wrestle with it. Just pause, step back, watch the thought, watch the watcher, loop into the loop. That is where your power lies. Cognitive spelunking. Have you ever sat with a thought long enough for it to change shape? Not vanish, not get pushed away, but actually morph, twist, reveal something under the surface you did not even know was there. That is what I call cognitive spelunking. It is like mental cave diving. You drop beneath the obvious stuff, past the noise, past the repeating patterns, and suddenly you are face to face with thoughts you forgot you had. Beliefs that have been running your life without permission. Most people never go that deep. They stay on the surface. I feel anxious. I feel tired. I feel stuck. End of story. But those are just symptoms, echoes of something deeper, something older, something buried. Here is where it gets wild. Your mind is layered, not just in some poetic way, but structurally. Your conscious mind is the top layer, the part of you that makes to-do lists, plans dinner, holds a conversation. But right beneath that is another layer. That is the part that reacts, interprets, filters the world before you even realize it. You see someone glance at you. You think they are judging you. You feel it. You believe it. But that interpretation came from a deeper layer. Maybe a wound. Maybe a memory. Maybe a belief you picked up years ago. You did not choose it. You just absorbed it, like fog soaking into clothes. Cognitive spelunking is the practice of diving down into those layers, not with force, not to fix, but to explore, to see what is actually living in the cave. The trick is you cannot do this with surface thinking. You have to slow down, create mental silence. Let the deeper stuff rise on its own. Sometimes it shows up as an image, a phrase, a random flash of a moment from childhood. You sit with it, let it unfold, and suddenly you are not just anxious anymore. You are realizing, oh, I feel invisible, or oh, I believe that if I slow down I will fail. That is the truth. The rest was just noise, and here is the part that breaks people open. Most of your mind is not logical, it is emotional, symbolic. The language of your inner world is more like dreams than spreadsheets. So if you try to fix your thoughts with logic alone, you will just keep spinning. It is like trying to climb a ladder inside a cave. You need a rope. You need to descend. You probably have thoughts that do not feel like thoughts. They feel like reality, like facts. I am not lovable. I am always behind. I do not matter. But these are just conclusions your mind filed away years ago, and they live in the dark until you shine a light on them. That is the point of spelunking, not to fix everything, but to see it, to witness what your mind has hidden in the shadows. Because once you see it clearly, it loses power. It becomes just a story, not a sentence, not a life sentence. There is a reason therapy, journaling, deep meditation, even psychedelics. They all work through the same mechanism. They slow down the noise. They let you descend. They let the hidden thoughts float to the top. And once they do, everything shifts. You stop trying to change how you feel. You start understanding why you feel. And that is where real healing happens, because your brain is not your enemy. It is just carrying old code, old protection, old stories that made sense back then, but maybe not anymore. You want clarity. You want peace. You want freedom. Then you need to go down there, into the cave, with a light, not to escape, but to explore. And look, it might be uncomfortable. You might find things you were not ready to see, but they have been living there anyway. They have been running parts of your life. You are not creating the pain by going inward. You are finally revealing it. Here is the tease. The deeper you go, the more space you make. Thoughts that used to control you become thoughts you can hold in your hand. Reactions that used to explode become signals you can navigate. That is power. That is mastery. So next time you feel something intense, do not just react. Sit with it. Ask what is under this. What is it protecting? Where did it start? Then wait. Do not force it. Let the cave speak. Because sometimes the darkest parts of your mind are not prisons. They are just rooms that have been waiting for you to enter with a light. Conceptual synesthesia. Imagine if you could hear colors, taste shapes, feel words. Not in some weird hallucination, but in a way that changes how you think, changes how you solve problems, changes how you see the world. That is conceptual synesthesia. It is not about mixing up your senses randomly. It is about your brain blending ideas across senses to create new connections, to think differently. Most people only use their senses the way they were taught. See red, hear a bell, smell coffee. But what if your mind could take the idea of red and not just see it but also feel it as warmth or taste it like cinnamon? What if hearing a bell also triggered a feeling of sharpness or a taste of mint? This is the secret power of conceptual synesthesia. It breaks down the walls between categories. Instead of ideas living in neat boxes, it lets them mix and dance. They collide in unexpected ways. That is where genius lives. Why does this matter? Because creativity is about connections. The more unusual the connection, the more original the idea. Your brain has trillions of possible connections, but most stay hidden because your senses and thoughts stay locked in their usual lanes. Conceptual synesthesia is like hacking your brain's operating system. It lets you cross wires, make shortcuts. Suddenly, problems that seemed impossible start to look solvable from new angles. You feel ideas before you understand them. You sense patterns before they are visible. For example, imagine you are stuck on a project. You keep trying the same logic over and over, but then you start to think of the problem as a sound, maybe a rhythm, or as a texture you can touch. This shift pulls you out of the box. It forces your brain to find patterns and solutions it could not see before. This is why some of the greatest artists, scientists, and inventors have described moments when senses blended. Nikola Tesla said he saw numbers in colors. Wassily Kandinsky painted music. Beethoven felt colors in sounds. This is not just poetic nonsense. It is a real cognitive phenomenon. And it is not limited to the gifted. You can learn it too. Scientists now know conceptual synesthesia happens because of extra connections between brain areas that normally do not talk directly. Instead of keeping vision, hearing, and touch separate, these connections blend inputs. That blending can spread into how you think about abstract ideas like time, emotion, or creativity itself. You do not need to be born with synesthesia to experience this. You can train your brain. Practice intentionally linking ideas with different senses. For example, when you learn a new concept, try to imagine what it would taste like or sound like or feel like physically. When you write or brainstorm, try to describe ideas using sensory language that does not normally belong to them. At first, this feels strange or awkward. Your mind resists, but over time it loosens the grip of rigid categories. It rewires your thinking to be more fluid and dynamic. It gives your imagination more oxygen. It brings ideas to life. There is a catch, though. You must let go of the idea that your senses or thoughts are separate, neat things. You have to accept ambiguity, accept messiness, because conceptual synesthesia lives in the in-between, the fuzzy space where ideas and sensations merge. That is where insight hides. And here is the best part. Once you tap into conceptual synesthesia, your mind becomes a playground. You start mixing metaphors in your thinking. You find new analogies and solutions. You see connections that others miss. You stop thinking in straight lines. You start thinking in constellations. This is why poets and writers use sensory metaphors, not just for style, but because it opens new pathways in the brain. You are literally thinking differently when you say a sadness tastes like lemon or a joy feels like sunshine. So if you want to hack your brain and think in fresh ways, try this now. Take a problem or idea you have. Now ask yourself, what would it sound like? What would it taste like? What would it feel like? Imagine those sensations vividly. Push past the first layer. Go deeper. Let your senses pull ideas into form. You might be surprised what your mind comes up with. Ideas can jump from one sense to another. Suddenly, you see the problem from angles you never imagined. Your thoughts are not just thoughts anymore. They are experiences. Conceptual synesthesia is not just a quirk. It is a powerful tool. A secret mind hack that anyone can use. Once you embrace it, you will never think the same way again. The delayed intuition hack. You ever notice how the best ideas come when you are not trying to think at all? Like you are brushing your teeth, or walking through a store, or just staring at the wall, and suddenly, boom, there it is, the answer. That is not random. That is not luck. That is the delayed intuition hack. Thinking better by not thinking sounds like a paradox, but it is actually one of the most powerful mental tricks your brain can pull off. Here is how it works. Your conscious mind is slow. It is good at rules and steps and focus, but it is bad at creativity. It is bad at patterns. It gets in its own way, like trying to dig through wet sand with a spoon. But your subconscious mind, that thing runs deep. It connects ideas while you sleep. It notices patterns before you even realize they are there. It is the part of you that can process 1,000 things while you are paying attention to one. When you face a hard question or a confusing decision, your first instinct is to sit down and force it. Think harder. Push through. But often that only makes it worse. You spin, you loop, you overanalyze, and nothing useful comes out. What you actually need to do is walk away. Literally, step back. Let the question sit in your brain like a background app, and move on to something else, something simple, something physical, something boring even. This is not laziness. This is strategy. Because your subconscious will keep working the problem without your interference. It will shuffle through your memories. It will simulate. It will test combinations. And it will hand you the result when it is ready. There is real science behind this. Psychologists call it incubation. It is the reason people say sleep on it, or let me think about it. What they are really saying is let my brain do the slow work behind the curtain. Think of your intuition like a delayed delivery. You put in the order when you first ask the question, but the delivery shows up later, out of nowhere, in the shower, on the train, as you are pouring coffee. Boom, the idea just appears. But here is the catch. You have to trust the delay. Most people panic. They want answers now. They want to solve it in one sitting. They do not believe in silence. They do not believe in space. They fill every gap with noise, with distractions, with stress. If you want this to work, you need to practice letting go. That means give your brain the problem, then leave it alone. Go for a walk, clean your room, listen to music, talk to a friend. Let your brain stretch its legs. You will be tempted to force it. You will feel like you are being unproductive. But that feeling is a lie. The work is still happening, just not where you can see it. One of the best examples of this is Albert Einstein. He said that his best ideas came when he was not thinking about physics at all. He would play the violin, go sailing, relax. That is when the solutions would surface, not when he was hunched over notes, but when he was open. The same goes for writers, for designers, for coders, for inventors. They all describe this moment of sudden clarity, as if the idea had been forming in the shadows. waiting for permission to show up. That is the delayed intuition hack. Let your brain build the answer in the background. Give it time. Give it quiet. Then just wait for the flash. You can practice this. Next time you are stuck, set a timer for 15 minutes. Walk away. Do something physical. No scrolling. No thinking. Just move. Breathe. Let it simmer. Then come back and notice how your mind feels different. Maybe the idea is not perfect, but it will be closer, sharper, smarter. Because you did not squeeze it to death. You thought better by not thinking. That is the trick. This is not about doing nothing forever. You still have to show up, still have to make the final decision, but you do it with insight that feels effortless, like it came from somewhere deeper. Because it did. The delayed intuition hack is not a gimmick. It is how your brain actually works when you stop trying to control it every second. You do not always need more effort. Sometimes you just need more space. And the moment you trust that space is the moment your best thinking begins. The illusion of choice. You walk into a store. You see 3 drinks on the shelf. You grab the one in the middle. You think you chose it. You think it was your decision. But what if it was not? What if the shelf placement made the decision? Or the lighting? Or the color of the label? Or the one you saw in a commercial last week without even remembering it? This is the illusion of choice. It feels like you are in control, like you are making decisions on your own. But in reality, your brain is reacting to a web of invisible triggers, most of them planted long before you ever noticed. Let me show you how deep this goes. Imagine you are offered 2 snacks. One says 90% fat-free. The other says contains 10% fat. Exact same product. But most people pick the first one. Why? Because your brain prefers gain over loss, even when they are the same thing. This is not logic. This is framing. A small twist in the way something is shown can hijack your choice before you even think. Or take another example. You go to vote. There are 3 names on the ballot. One of them is first on the list. Research shows that name gets a small bump, not because it is better, but because it is first. That is enough for your mind to lean in that direction. Every day you are making decisions that feel like free will, but they are shaped by defaults, by repetition, by design, and by the stories your brain tells to make sense of what just happened. And here is the twist. Your brain does not like admitting that. It wants to believe it is in charge, so it creates a clean explanation after the fact. It says, I chose this because I liked it. I chose this because it made sense. But that reasoning often comes after the choice was already made. This is called post-rationalization. Your brain fills in the reason once the decision is already locked in. It is a cover story, not a cause. Marketers use this. Politicians use this. Tech companies use this. They do not need to control your actions directly. They just need to control the environment around your actions. Then sit back while you believe it was all you. You think you picked the song, but the algorithm played it 3 times this week. You think you picked the restaurant, but it had 5-star reviews and was at the top of your feed. You think you picked your opinion, but the people around you all shared the same meme. It feels like freedom, but it is a hallway with invisible walls. Now I am not saying you have no free will, but I am saying your free will is not as free as you think. It is filtered, nudged, framed, and layered with habits so old you forgot they were ever learned. Even your preferences. You like what you are used to. You crave what you recognize. You tend to choose the familiar, even if you think you are exploring something new. This is why it is so hard to break patterns. Your brain is not designed for pure freedom. It is designed for efficiency, and that means using shortcuts. Heuristics, biases, which all shape your so-called choices. But here is the good news. Once you see the illusion, you can start playing with it. You can slow down before deciding. You can ask where the impulse came from. You can change the defaults, break the patterns, step outside the frame. You can design your environment so it serves your real goals, not the ones sold to you by someone else. You can choose discomfort on purpose, choose silence, choose the longer path, just to make sure it is actually your choice. The illusion of choice is only dangerous when you do not see it. But once you do, you are not just reacting anymore. You are reclaiming. Next time you make a decision, pause. Ask yourself why that one? Why not the other? Where did that preference come from? What invisible hand shaped the moment before you acted? Most people never ask. They just go along. They trust the feeling of choice more than the truth of it. But not you. You are here because you want to see deeper, to pull back the curtain, to think better. And the first step is realizing that most of what feels like choice is actually momentum. Once you see that, you can stop, you can pivot, you can finally choose. For real. The paradox of prediction. You ever have one of those moments where someone tells you what might happen, and then just by knowing it you feel like the whole outcome shifts? Like it was set to go one way until you peeked at it, and suddenly the path bent sideways. That is what this is about. The paradox of prediction. When simply knowing the future is enough to change it, it sounds like a trick, like some kind of mind game. But it is not. It is how we are wired. The second you believe something is going to happen, your behavior starts leaning toward that version of reality, even if you do not realize it. Even if you think you are just watching things play out. You are not just watching. You are reacting. And that reaction feeds back into the system. Let me give you something simple. You are told you will probably fail that interview. Maybe it is the tone of the person who said it. Maybe it is your own inner voice. But the seed is planted. Now you walk in more nervous, less sharp. You hold back a little, and suddenly the failure becomes real. Not because the future told you what would happen, but because you adjusted yourself to meet it. Now flip it. Someone says you are definitely going to win. So you loosen up. You stop prepping. You coast on the idea that it is already yours. And then you fall short. Not because the future changed, but because your belief about it did. You do this every day. You predict tiny futures constantly. The mood of a conversation, the outcome of a message, the way someone will respond. And every time you expect something, your body and your mind shift to accommodate it. Even silence is a decision. Even hesitation is momentum. This is the part people miss. You are not just a thinker. You are a builder. The thoughts you carry become the shape of your next action. And when you see the future in your head, you start carving toward it. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. That is why prediction is not neutral. It is not passive. It is not like reading the weather. It is more like stepping into the forecast and creating storms with your steps. The future is not a script you follow. It is clay that responds to your hands. You make a plan, and just making that plan already begins to change the outcome. You tell someone you love them, and in the moment of speaking it, the future shifts. You think about quitting something, a job, a relationship, a habit, and the second that thought gets serious, your behavior starts pulling away from the present. That is the paradox. That is the loop. That is the glitch in the system. People like to imagine the future as a fixed road, something that is out there waiting for them. But in truth, the future is more like a ripple. It changes the moment you throw a rock, and your attention, your intention, your beliefs. Those are the rocks. This is why it is so easy to get trapped by your own mind. You think you are predicting the future, but you are actually programming it. Or worse, you are reacting to someone else's program. You hear the news, you hear a comment, you watch a video, and suddenly you are living inside a forecast you did not even agree to. That is how influence works. It does not need to control you directly. It just needs to shape your expectation. Your expectation takes care of the rest. So what do? You get aware. You learn to slow down your reactions to your own thoughts. You recognize that just because you can imagine something does not mean it is real yet. It is not a prophecy. It is a possibility. That is a massive difference. You start asking better questions, like who benefits from me believing this version of the future? Who profits from my panic? Who gains if I give up before I start? Who designed the story that I am reacting to? Because once you see the story, you can rewrite it. That is the real power. Not prediction, but participation. You do not have to know exactly where it is going. You just need to show up with clarity, with presence, with the ability to respond instead of react. The future bends to those who move with awareness. Not control, not certainty, but awareness. Sometimes the strongest move is not to predict what is coming. It is to act in a way that keeps you grounded no matter what comes. Because once you realize that every prediction becomes part of the outcome, you stop trying to be psychic, and you start trying to be honest. Honest with what you are feeling, what you are believing, and how much of that belief is based on fear instead of fact. That is what the paradox teaches you. You do not just influence the future. You create it the moment you start believing in it. So believe wisely, act deliberately, and remember this: you are not here to follow the path. You are here to shape it. Silent advice. There is this weird trick the mind plays. You are stuck on a problem, spinning in circles, trying to decide. You ask people for advice. They tell you what they think, but it does not help. You feel just as unsure, sometimes even more confused. But then something strange happens. You pause. You imagine what someone you respect would say, not what they actually said, what they would say if they were standing in front of you. You picture their tone, their way of thinking, the way they would look at you while saying it. And somehow, that helps more than the real thing ever did. That is silent advice. It is not about the words. It is about the part of you that already knows how they think. Because when you imagine their perspective, you activate a different part of your mind. You step out of your own loop, your own fears, your own habits, and you borrow a frame that is just far enough outside your own to give you clarity. What makes this powerful is that you are not really asking them. You are channeling them. And that subtle shift makes all the difference. When someone tells you what to do, you resist, you second guess, you weigh their opinion against your own. It becomes a debate. But when you simulate their mind inside yours, you are still the one in charge. You are not being told. You are seeing things through another lens. A lens you chose. Your brain loves to simulate. It is doing it all the time. You think about a conversation before it happens. You rehearse what someone might say. You predict reactions before you make a move. That is not a flaw. That is a tool. You can take that same energy and aim it with intention. Instead of asking 10 people what they think, Try asking one person in your imagination, and not just anybody. Someone you genuinely admire, someone whose life or decisions you respect, someone whose values stretch your own but do not cancel them. The more vividly you imagine their advice, the more useful it becomes. This is not a fantasy. This is actually a studied effect. In psychology, they call it perspective shifting. You create mental models of other people, and your brain uses those models to help solve problems you cannot figure out alone. In a way, the imagined advice is filtered through your subconscious in a cleaner way than real feedback, because there is no ego, no judgment, no awkward delivery, just the distilled essence of what that person stands for. This works even if the person is not alive. That is what makes it so strange. Some people imagine what a historical figure would say, or a version of themselves from the future, or even a fictional character who stands for something they need right now. The point is not to get the perfect answer. The point is to unlock a voice inside you that you trust. It is like having a secret counsel in your head, and every time you face a decision, you can consult them without speaking a word. Why does this help more than asking directly? Because advice in the real world is messy. It is loaded with tone, bias, timing. People misunderstand your question. They project their own problems. They sugarcoat, or they speak too harshly. But when you imagine the advice, you can edit, you can slow down, you can sit with it longer, you can listen at your own pace. Also, you are more honest with yourself when the voice is internal. You do not waste time defending your choices. You just explore them. Quietly, carefully. Try it the next time you are stuck. Close your eyes. Picture the person who would really see through your excuses, or who would calm you down instead of hyping you up, or who would challenge you to take the hard road when you are playing it safe. Do not just think about what they would say. Feel it. Hear it in your mind. Let it echo. And then pay attention to how your body reacts. Do you feel relief, clarity, resistance? That is your signal, because it is not just what the voice says. It is what your gut does with it. That is where the real answer lies. This trick is not about running from real people. It is about remembering that some of the best guidance is already inside you. You have collected pieces of people all your life. Ideas, lessons, stories, warnings, encouragement. It is all in there, stored, waiting. You just need a quiet moment to hear it. And that is the final irony. Sometimes the most powerful advice you will ever get is the one you imagined for yourself, through someone else, in silence. Neural fatigue reset. There is a point your brain hits where it just stops firing right. You are not tired in the sleep sense. You are tired in the thinking sense. Your thoughts get fuzzy. Your decisions get slower. You reread the same sentence 3 times and it still does not click. That is not laziness. That is neural fatigue. The world is obsessed with hustle. Push harder. Grind longer. But your brain does not care about motivational quotes. It cares about patterns, chemicals, energy cycles, and when it is done, it is done. The lights are on, but nothing new is happening. Here is the trick most people do not realize. You can reset it. Not with sleep, not with coffee, with something faster. Something your nervous system understands. You can give your mind a jump start in a few minutes if you know what signal to send. Think about what fatigue really is. It is not just about exhaustion. It is about repetition. It is what happens when your brain loops through the same circuit too many times without novelty, without relief, without contrast. You do not just need rest. You need interruption. Mental fatigue is like a radio stuck on one station. Eventually the music becomes noise. But if you twist the dial, even a little, suddenly the system wakes up again. It is the shift that resets the signal. Here is one of the fastest ways to do that. Pattern break, stand up, change your environment. Go somewhere with a different temperature, a different light, a different sound. Do not scroll. Do not think. Just shift the input. Walk outside for 2 minutes. Splash cold water on your face. Lay on the floor. Literally invert your position. The brain loves novelty because novelty means pay attention. Another powerful reset is micro-stillness. Sit with your eyes closed for 60 seconds. No phone. No thinking. Just awareness. Count your breaths if you have to. You are not meditating. You are rebooting. You are breaking the input loop that is clogging your prefrontal cortex. That is the part of your brain that handles decision-making. Focus. Imagination. When it gets overloaded, it shuts down. But if you stop feeding it, it resets. And then there is movement. Not exercise, not a workout, just rhythm. Gentle rhythm, rocking side to side, tapping your fingers in a steady beat, swaying while standing. The nervous system finds rhythm calming. It sends a signal to the body that says we are okay. We are not in threat. We are just stuck. That soft motion brings back cognitive clarity faster than sitting and staring at a screen, trying to force it. Now let us talk about visual resets. Stare at a point in the distance. Out a window. Down a hallway. Something that stretches your focus far away from your face. When you stare up close all day, your eyes and your brain get locked in tunnel mode. Your field of vision shrinks. Your mind follows. But when you look out, especially into nature, you widen the aperture of attention, and that alone can refresh the whole system. There is also a sound reset. Play one sound, not music, just a tone, or white noise, or ambient nature. One sound. Close your eyes and let your brain soak in just that. It cancels the internal noise. It does not even need to be long. 30 seconds can do more than another hour of scrolling through mental fog. Here is the deeper point. Fatigue is not always solved by adding more energy. It is solved by removing interference. You are not broken. You are overloaded. You are not slow. You are saturated. So stop trying to squeeze more thinking out of a tired machine. Empty it, then restart. This is why some of your best ideas come when you are walking, in the shower, listening to rain, not trying, because those are the moments your brain stops chasing output and starts sorting itself out. You do not force a reboot. You allow it. That shift from force to flow, that is the key. You can reset your neural clarity in 5 minutes. You just need to interrupt the signal that is burning you out, not with intensity, but with simplicity. So next time you hit that wall, that fog, that dragging haze that coffee will not touch. Try something different. Stand up. Change your light. Breathe slow. Tap your fingers. Stare out the window. Give your brain the gift of one moment that does not demand anything from it, and watch what happens next. It is not about escaping your work. It is about returning to it with a system that is actually working. You cannot think clearly in a space that never stops. So pause, gently, briefly, on purpose, then begin again. That is how you reboot your brain without sleep. You do not need a nap. You need a new signal. The rabbit hole effect. You know how sometimes you ask yourself a simple question and suddenly hours vanish like smoke in the wind. One tiny thought hooks you, and before you know it, you are deep down a rabbit hole that seems endless. It happens to everyone, but few really understand why this happens or how powerful it really is. The rabbit hole effect is a trap, but it's also a secret weapon. It starts with curiosity, which is one of the most powerful drives we have. When you ask a question that really grabs your attention, your brain lights up like a city at night. Every neuron in your head wants to chase that question. But here's the catch. The more you chase it, the less you notice everything else. Your focus narrows down until the rest of the world blurs out. You might start by Googling something small, maybe a detail about a book, a name you heard, or an idea you barely understood. That tiny spark turns into a wildfire. Links lead to other links, videos to articles, and before you know it, you have forgotten what you were originally doing. Time melts away because your brain is engaged in what feels like a treasure hunt. The reason this works so well is because questions create tension. They are like a mental itch that needs scratching. Your brain hates unresolved problems, so it keeps pushing you deeper to find answers. But here's the paradox. The more you try to resolve that itch by following every lead, the more lost you get. You can keep chasing answers that only lead to more questions. This is why one simple question can hijack your entire day without you realizing. It is not just about distraction. It is about how your brain handles novelty and reward. When you find a new piece of information, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical that makes you feel good. That little hit of pleasure reinforces the search. You want more. The question becomes a magnet pulling you further into complexity and curiosity spirals. There's also something deeply human about this. We are wired to explore, to learn, to understand. That drive is essential for survival and growth, but it can also backfire. When left unchecked, curiosity turns into a loop that pulls you away from what matters most in the moment. You lose track of time, you lose energy, and sometimes you lose motivation because the question never really ends. The rabbit hole effect is why so many people feel overwhelmed by information overload. The internet is an endless maze of ideas and questions, and unless you control the journey, it controls you. Your attention becomes fragmented and scattered. You get stuck in this cycle of chasing questions without answers, and that drains your mental resources. So what can you do about it? The first step is awareness. Just knowing the rabbit hole effect exists changes how you experience those moments. When you feel yourself starting to chase a question, ask yourself, what purpose does this serve right now? Am I learning something useful, or am I just feeding the itch? Am I gaining clarity or losing it? Next, try setting boundaries. Give yourself a timer. 10 minutes to explore, then stop. Even better, jot down your questions in a notebook so you can return later without losing track. This simple act separates curiosity from distraction and lets you control your mental energy instead of being controlled by it. Another powerful move is to ask better questions. Instead of vague or open-ended ones, try framing questions that have clear goals or limits. For example, instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" ask, "What is the next step I can take?" This shifts your brain from wandering into action and gives you a direction instead of an endless chase. Finally, remember to come back to the present. When you feel stuck in a rabbit hole, pause, take a breath, look around. Remind yourself that no question is more important than your time and your life. The power to choose where your attention goes is yours. You do not have to let one question hijack your day. The rabbit hole effect is a reminder of how powerful curiosity can be and how easily it can consume you if left unchecked. But it is also a tool. When you learn to recognize it and use it with intention, you can harness that magnetic pull of questions to fuel creativity, learning, and growth without losing yourself. Your mind is like a compass. questions point you toward new places, but only you decide which path to follow. So next time you catch yourself spiraling down a rabbit hole, remember this. You are in control. Curiosity is a gift, but it is also a choice. Choose wisely. Mental latency awareness. There is a strange kind of trap that most people fall into every single day without realizing it. You feel certain about something. Totally sure. No doubts. And then it turns out you were completely wrong. You misunderstood the message. You misjudged the person. You made a decision that felt right but led to the exact opposite of what you wanted. The weird part is not that you made a mistake. It is that your brain gave you a green light. It told you, yes, this is the truth. Yes, this is the right move. That false confidence is not a glitch. It is a feature of how your mind works. And unless you recognize it, you will keep falling for it again and again. This is what mental latency is. It is the delay between reality and your brain's version of it. Your mind is a prediction machine. It constantly guesses what is happening based on patterns and past experiences, but sometimes those guesses get served up as facts before the truth has time to land. You feel certainty before your mind has finished loading the full picture. You react. You believe. You act. And then you realize something was off. That gap is mental latency, and it happens more than you think. This is why someone can swear they remember a conversation that never happened, or insist they know exactly what someone meant by a glance or a tone, or walk into a room with an assumption and filter everything they hear through it. The brain is fast, but it is not always right. It would rather be quick than accurate. That is how it keeps you moving. But that speed comes with a cost. Especially when the stakes are emotional, social, creative, strategic. Mental latency is not just a delay in logic. It is a delay in self-awareness. You do not just miss facts, you miss your own blind spots. You do not realize how much you are filling in the gaps with guesses, with emotional residue, with leftover beliefs from other people or other moments. You feel a clean yes, a sharp no, a strong conviction, but underneath that is a tangle of assumptions that never got questioned. The danger is not just being wrong. The danger is acting while you are still in the fog. You trust a gut feeling that was built on incomplete data. You follow a thought that feels smooth just because it arrived quickly. You defend an idea because it feels like yours even though it was handed to you by someone else years ago. That is the real trick. The brain does not wait for clarity. It moves the moment something feels familiar or emotionally charged, and you get pulled along with it unless you hit pause. So how do you develop mental latency awareness? First, you learn to spot the symptoms. Certainty that arrives too fast, answers that feel too neat, emotions that flare up instantly and push you into decisions. These are all signs that you might be reacting from latency, not from clarity. When you catch those moments, treat them like yellow lights. Slow down. Recheck. Ask yourself, what am I not seeing yet? What am I assuming? What part of this feels good simply because it is fast or familiar? Another powerful move is to separate the feeling of certainty from the act of decision-making. Just because something feels true does not mean it is ready to be acted on. Let your emotions speak, but do not let them drive. Give your thoughts time to breathe. Let new perspectives come in before you lock the door. This is not about doubting everything. It is about understanding the delay. It is about respecting the fact that your brain sometimes speaks before it knows what it is saying. That is not weakness. That is humanity. The strongest thinkers are not the fastest. They are the ones who know when to wait, when to recheck, When to say I am not sure yet, but I am listening. Mental latency awareness is a kind of inner honesty. It is the skill of holding space between what you feel and what is real, between your first reaction and your final conclusion. And that space is where the real thinking happens. That is where insight lives. That is where growth starts. So next time you feel totally sure, take a breath. Ask yourself, what am I rushing past? What am I filling in too quickly? What do I need to let settle before I respond? Because your brain is not always lying, but it is not always telling the whole truth either. And if you can learn to hear the silence between the signals, you will start to make better choices, sharper decisions, and a clearer kind of progress. Emotion substitution. Fear is fast. It hijacks your body before you can even say what you are afraid of. Heart beats faster. Muscles tighten. Breath shallows. And then your thoughts race to match it. What if this goes wrong? What if I mess this up? What if they laugh? What if I lose? It becomes a loop that locks you down. But what if you could interrupt that loop? Not by fighting the fear, not by pushing it away, but by swapping it with something else. This is emotion substitution. And one of the most powerful swaps you can make is replacing fear with curiosity. It sounds simple, but this changes everything. Curiosity is emotionally lighter. It is spacious. It asks, what is this, instead of what if this ruins me? And the crazy thing is that your body reacts differently the moment you shift into that question. Your breathing slows. Your vision expands. Your attention opens up instead of locking onto danger. All because your mind reframed the signal. You have to understand this. Emotions are not facts. They are impulses. And they can be changed in real time. Your brain does not care about the exact content of the emotion. It responds to direction. When you steer your attention with intention, your emotion follows. Fear says close. Curiosity says open. Fear says protect. Curiosity says explore. You are not trying to feel good. You are trying to feel free enough to move again. Think about this. You are about to speak in front of a group. You feel the fear coming. The voice in your head starts whispering failure, judgment, embarrassment. Most people try to fight it. Take deep breaths. Push it away. But that still leaves fear in the driver's seat. Now try this instead. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to be fascinated by this moment? What if I was a scientist inside my own body right now? What is this tension trying to teach me? What if this was just data? That question flips the script. Curiosity gives your nervous system something new to do. It activates exploration networks in your brain. It sends a different chemical message. You start scanning for insight instead of threats. You look at faces and see reactions instead of danger. You feel the energy and interpret it as readiness instead of risk. Nothing external changed, but your internal lens did. That is the power of substitution. Now here is the key. You have to catch fear early. Once it snowballs, it becomes harder to reroute. But that first jolt, that first tightening, that is your window. And this is where practice matters. You train for this like a muscle. Over time you get faster, sharper, more automatic. The moment fear whispers, you respond with wonder. You respond with, what is this trying to show me? You treat fear like a messenger, not a monster. The best part, curiosity has no ego. It is not about performance. It is about discovery. You do not have to pretend you are brave. You just have to be interested. And being interested is something you already know how to do. You were born with it. You used it before fear ever had a name. You asked why 1,000 times a day. You touched everything. You looked under every rock. Curiosity is not a trick. It is your original setting. In fact, the science backs this up. When researchers study high performers in high-pressure environments, they find one thing again and again. The people who thrive are the ones who stay curious under stress. They do not numb it. They do not dominate it. They stay open to the moment. They engage with it, and that keeps the mind flexible, which keeps the body stable. But this is not just about performance. This is about life, relationships, creativity, growth. Fear shuts down everything it touches. Curiosity breathes life into everything it sees. When something scares you, you have a choice. You can armor up, or you can lean in. And leaning in does not mean you like it. It means you are willing to see it fully. So here is the challenge. The next time you feel fear rise up, do not ask, how do I get rid of this? Ask, what is here that I have not noticed yet? What part of this moment is asking for attention, not avoidance? What happens if I watch this instead of react to it? That one shift can change the whole experience. You cannot always stop fear from arriving. But you do not have to let it run the show. Curiosity is not louder than fear. It is just smarter. It sees more. It stays longer. It finds freedom where fear sees walls. Train yourself to make that swap. Make it quickly. Make it often. Eventually it becomes automatic. Fear shows up. Curiosity opens the door. And you walk through instead of turning away. Word placement manipulation. Say this out loud. I never said she stole the money. Now say it again, but emphasize a different word each time. I never said she stole the money. I never said she stole the money. I never said she stole the money. With just one sentence, you can create 7 different meanings just by changing which word carries the weight. Nothing else changes, not the words, just the order of attention. That is the hidden power of word placement. And most people never realize they are under its spell. Here is the shocking part. Your brain does not read language like a computer. It does not scan line by line and store it in neutral containers. It feels it. It predicts the emotional shape of a sentence before it even finishes. It hears rhythm, tone, pressure, and uses all that to decide what matters. Meaning is not built from words alone. It is built from their position, the weight they carry, the order they arrive in. This is why politicians can twist meaning without changing facts. It is how marketers can make the same sentence sound inspiring or terrifying depending on the structure. It is why poets obsess over line breaks, why comedians live or die by their punchline placement. Word order is not cosmetic. It is psychological architecture. Take this example. She almost won. Now switch it. She won almost. The second one feels confusing, uncertain. Even though the words are familiar, the impact is totally different. That last word has power. It becomes the part your brain remembers. This is why you can bury bad news in the middle of a sentence and people will forget it. Or place a call to action at the end and they will remember it. The end of the sentence is where the emotional echo lives. But this goes deeper. Word placement can reshape your own thoughts. The order you speak or write in literally changes what you believe. If you start a sentence with a fear phrase, like "what if this fails," you shape the rest of your thinking with that energy. But if you start with a possibility like "imagine if this works," your mind opens up differently. The sequence of thoughts becomes the shape of belief. This is especially true in self-talk. The difference between "I am not ready yet" and "I am ready, just not yet" is tiny on paper. But psychologically it is massive. The first implies a lack of ability. The second implies timing. Same words, different path. Language is like code. Small shifts in structure rewrite the entire program. Even in conversation, the order of what you say changes how people hear you. If you start with criticism, people tense up. If you start with curiosity, they lean in. The words can be identical. The placement is what unlocks or shuts down connection. This is not just about grammar. It is about power. Knowing how to move words around means you can frame reality more consciously. You are not at the mercy of automatic phrasing. You are sculpting the experience. This is one of the most underused tools in thinking and communication. You can try this right now. Take any sentence you say often. Something like, "I do not have time for this." Now flip the pieces. "This is not what I have time for." Still similar, but the emphasis has shifted. It feels like a decision instead of an excuse, a boundary instead of a complaint. You can do this with almost any thought you carry around. Reorder the pieces and watch what happens to the feeling behind it. In writing, this is what separates dull from sharp. Sentences that land hard usually end with the punch, not the disclaimer. The most powerful word should come last, unless you are trying to soften the blow. This is also why headlines use inversion. Not "you are eating this food wrong," but "you are eating this common food wrong." The order builds tension. You read to the end, because each word unlocks the next. When you understand word placement, you stop being passive with language. You start shaping it the way a sculptor shapes clay. You stop saying things just how they show up in your mind. You start rearranging them for impact. And that gives you a strange kind of influence over your own perception. You do not have to change what you say, just how you say it, just where the words fall. So the next time you speak, pay attention, not just to what you are saying, but to how the sentence unfolds, where it begins, where it ends, which word is getting the spotlight. Because in the end, language is not about correctness, it is about effect. And word placement is one of the most powerful levers you can pull. Ego suspension. You know that moment when someone disagrees with you and your whole body tenses up before you even think about it. That flash of defensiveness. That urge to prove. That silent pressure to win the conversation instead of learn from it. That is your ego grabbing the wheel. And it happens fast, way before logic kicks in. But what if you could slow it down? What if you could think without needing to be right? Not forever, just long enough to see clearly. This is ego suspension, and it might be the sharpest mental tool you are not using. Most people think ego is just about arrogance, but it is deeper than that. Ego is your need to be seen a certain way, smart, competent, in control. Being wrong feels like death to the ego because it threatens that image. It is not about the idea being right. It is about you being right. So we defend, we justify, we ignore facts that don't fit, not because we are bad thinkers, but because we are protecting the idea of ourselves. And here is where it gets dangerous. The smarter you are, the harder this hits, because you get better at building arguments to defend your identity. You are not searching for truth. You are building a case. It feels like thinking, but it is just protecting. You are not evolving your mind. You are armoring it. Ego suspension breaks that pattern. It is not ego death. You do not have to erase your identity or pretend you have no opinions. It is just a temporary pause, a moment where you take your personal attachment out of the idea so you can see the idea itself. It is like holding a hot object with tongues instead of grabbing it barehanded. You create space between you and the thought. And that space is everything, because in that space curiosity can breathe. In that space insight shows up. In that space someone can tell you something that changes your mind, and it does not feel like losing. It feels like upgrading. But you cannot get there while ego is running the show. Try this in conversation. When you feel that urge to interrupt or correct or defend, pause and ask, what if I am wrong? Not in a self-punishing way. Not in a fake humility way. Just as a mental opening. What would have to be true for their idea to make sense? What am I missing? That question alone shifts your emotional state. You become less rigid, less threatened, more engaged. Even better, try this with your own thoughts. Take an opinion you hold strongly about politics, about people, about yourself. Now ask, what if the opposite is true? Not because it is, but because your brain needs contrast to think clearly. When you suspend ego, you give yourself permission to explore that contrast without fear. You are not betraying your belief. You are testing its shape. And here is the twist. Ego suspension actually makes your ideas sharper, because now they are pressure tested. Now they are flexible. Now you can refine them without shattering your identity. You are not fragile. You are fluid. And that makes you dangerous in the best way. But make no mistake, this is hard. Your brain is wired to protect identity first and understand later. The only way to flip that is practice. You have to train the pause. You have to learn to enjoy the feeling of being uncertain. Most people hate that feeling. But that is where growth lives, in the discomfort between beliefs. So if you want to think better, start with this. Get curious when you feel defensive. Slow down when you feel certain. Question your certainty, not to destroy it, but to make sure it is yours, and not something you just inherited. The goal is not to never be wrong. The goal is to not need to be right. That is the mental unlock, and do not confuse this with weakness. This is not about being passive. This is about being powerful enough to not need your ideas to be shields. It is about becoming a better observer of your own mind. It is about gaining control, not losing it. When you can suspend ego, you become the kind of thinker people trust, because they can feel you are not here to dominate. You are here to discover. So next time you are in a debate, or sitting with a tough decision, or spiraling in your own self-talk, try this. Say out loud, I can be wrong and still be valuable. Then ask, what is really true here beyond my pride? If you can hold that question long enough, something will shift. You will feel it. And that shift is not weakness. It is wisdom being born. Context priming via environment design. You ever notice how you feel smarter in a library? Or how you suddenly want to eat cleaner in a white, bright kitchen? Or how you sit up straighter when you walk into a room with high ceilings and big windows? That is not just coincidence. That is context doing something to your brain. Your environment is not a background. It is a script your mind reads and follows without asking for permission. What we are talking about is context priming, the hidden way your surroundings shape what you think, how you act, and even what kind of person you believe you are in that moment. You walk into a gym, and your brain primes for discipline. You walk into a messy bedroom, and your brain slides into low power mode. And you do not even realize it is happening. The furniture, the lighting, the smell, the layout, all of it whispers a story to your nervous system. And that story decides how you show up. Here is the wild part. You can be the same person with the same values and the same intelligence, but change the room, and you change your behavior. Psychologists have run experiments where just placing a briefcase on the table instead of a backpack makes people more competitive. A poster with eyes on it makes people act more honest. A warm cup in your hand makes you describe strangers as more friendly. That is how easy it is to prime the mind. And that is how often we get primed without even knowing it. Now imagine if you flipped that around. Instead of reacting to the environment, you built it like a mental shortcut. You used the space around you to cue better thinking. That is what environment design is. It is not about aesthetics. It is about programming your future self, setting traps for your laziness, creating a world where the friction points are reversed, where focus feels automatic, where action feels obvious. Not because you are more disciplined, but because the room helps you. This is not about productivity porn. You do not need a $20,000 standing desk or a minimalist concrete cave to make this work. It can be stupid simple. Move your phone charger out of your bedroom. Boom. Better sleep. Put your journal on your pillow so you see it before bed. Boom. Consistency. Keep your running shoes in plain sight by the door. Now your brain sees exercise as a default, not a decision. Even colors matter. Bright blues and whites boost focus. Soft ambers calm the nervous system. Music matters. Scent matters. Every little environmental detail is like an input signal to your subconscious. And the real trick is to design it ahead of time, when your willpower is high, so that when you are tired, distracted, or stressed, the environment still holds the line for you. It becomes a kind of surrogate discipline. And this goes deeper than just habit shaping. Context primes mindset. You can build spaces that tell your brain it is time to create, time to reflect, time to shut the world out, or time to open up. You can use physical space to summon mental space. That is the hack. You do not always need to push harder. Sometimes you just need to rearrange the room. This works with people too. Certain people act like environmental cues. You think differently around them. You believe differently. The same is true for digital spaces. The apps on your home screen, the tabs you leave open, the playlists you run on loop. That is all environment. That is all context. That is all prime real estate for shaping your thinking without you lifting a finger in the moment. And you do not need to wait for the perfect space. Start with what you have. Choose one place you spend a lot of time in. Now ask yourself, what does this room tell my brain? Does it cue focus or fatigue, growth or comfort, curiosity or boredom? And what tiny shift could flip that signal? Maybe it is more light. Maybe it is less clutter. Maybe it is one object removed or one added. The smallest detail can ripple. This is how you sneak past your excuses. You do not argue with your brain. You just change what it sees. And that changes what it believes. That is the secret. The brain does not always need convincing. Sometimes it just needs context. The disfluency effect. There is a strange thing your brain does when it runs into difficulty. When the words are blurry, or the task feels clunky, or the path is not smooth. Instead of giving up like you think it might, something else kicks in. It wakes up. It starts paying attention. It goes deeper, slower, sharper. That is the disfluency effect, and it is one of the most unintuitive ways to get smarter. See, your brain loves efficiency. It wants to go fast. It loves familiarity. It loves ease. And that is the trap. Because when things feel easy, your brain runs on autopilot. You skim, you assume, you barely engage, and it feels good. But you are not actually learning. You are just coasting. Now throw in a little friction. Make the font harder to read. Make the problem less obvious. Make the path slightly uncomfortable. And something wild happens. You stop skimming. You slow down. You engage your system to thinking, the deliberate analytical part, the part that solves puzzles instead of reacting to them. Researchers have tested this in the simplest ways. They gave students the same materials but changed the fonts. One was clean and readable. The other was a little messy, harder to process. The students with the messy font actually remembered more and understood the content better. Not because the font was better, but because the disfluency made their brains work harder. And when your brain works harder, it builds stronger memory traces. The struggle forces depth. Now, this does not mean you should make everything in your life harder for no reason. It means you should learn to recognize when ease is actually costing you, when the path of least resistance is leading to shallow thinking. And then, on purpose, choose the slower path. This is why writing things out by hand still works better for memory than typing. It is not just nostalgia. Writing is slower, messier. It forces your brain to organize information more intentionally. You cannot just copy and paste. You have to translate it. That is disfluency. It is why explaining something to a 5-year-old helps you understand it better than reading a textbook 10 times. Because now you have to fight through the fuzz. You have to simplify. You have to struggle with the language. That struggle is where the insight lies. So many people avoid difficulty because they think difficulty means they are doing something wrong. But in learning, difficulty is often the signal you are doing it right. If your brain feels like it is dragging through mud, it is probably about to build something new. You are not dumb. You are learning. Think about it like working out. If the weight is too light, you can move fast, but you do not grow. Add resistance and your muscles tear and rebuild stronger. Same thing with thinking. Disfluency is mental resistance, and resistance creates cognitive strength. This is why great thinkers often read things twice or 3 times. They wrestle with the sentence. They chew the meaning. They do not rush clarity. They welcome the fog because they know what comes after it. Precision, depth, mastery. The trick is not to create confusion for its own sake. The trick is to not fear it, to not quit the second something feels unclear, to lean into the friction and trust that your mind is learning something beneath the surface, that the process is working even when it feels slow. So if you want to learn faster, do not just consume more. Add intentional friction. Turn off captions. Pause the video and explain it to yourself out loud. Read dense stuff slowly instead of binging simple content fast. Print things out. Write in margins. Make it ugly. Make it effortful. Because every time you do that, you are teaching your brain to not just notice, but to understand. And understanding is what lasts. That is the difference between skimming your way through 10 books and deeply digesting one. One will impress your shelf. The other will change your thinking. So the next time something feels hard to read or tricky to grasp or slow to sink in, do not rush past it. Stop. Sit in it. Fight through it. That discomfort you are feeling is your mind stretching. And you do not grow without the stretch. The end anchor flip. You ever have a bad day? One of those slow, heavy days where everything feels a little off. And by the time you crawl into bed, your brain just goes, "Yup, today was a mess." But what if I told you that entire story your brain told itself could be flipped in the last 10 minutes? That how your day ends secretly decides how it gets remembered. That is the end anchor flip. And once you learn it, you will never treat the final minutes of your day the same again. Your brain is not fair when it tells your story. It does not remember things based on how long they lasted or how much time they took up. It remembers based on intensity and ending. That is it. The peak and the end. Those are the anchors. You could have had 8 hours of neutral or even decent moments, but if the last part of your day sucked your brain, we'll tag the whole thing as bad. Not because it was, but because the ending left a sour aftertaste. It is the same reason a 2-hour movie can feel amazing or terrible, depending entirely on the last 5 minutes. That final beat retroactively edits everything before it. It puts a frame around the experience. And your brain does this all the time. Every day gets boxed and filed based on how it ends, which means if you understand that mechanism, you can game it. You can rewrite the mental file even after a rough day, and it only takes 10 minutes. The key is not pretending the bad stuff did not happen. That is denial. This is different. This is about intentionally creating a closing moment that signals to your brain, hey, we are okay. We learned. We landed. We made it. Because when the ending feels stable, the brain lets go of tension. It stops looping. It closes the file clean. You can literally shift your emotional memory of the day just by doing something meaningful in those final moments. And it does not have to be dramatic. A short reflection, a slow breath, a 5-minute walk in silence, a single page written in a journal, or just turning off the lights and saying, okay, today is done, but I am still here. That moment right there becomes the new anchor, and that anchor is what your brain remembers. Think about the last 10 minutes of your night like mental editing software. This is your chance to soften the noise, smooth the edges, and send a new signal to your memory system. You are not changing the facts of the day. You are changing the emotional summary, and the brain runs on summaries more than specifics. Neurologically, this taps into how your hippocampus stores episodic memories. It flags emotional peaks and endings as priority data. So if you feed it calm or insight or closure right before sleep, that becomes the highlight reel. Not the traffic jam. Not the awkward meeting. Not the spiral you had at 3 p.m. The highlight becomes the stillness, the breath, the awareness. It is not about being productive. It is about being deliberate. You are telling your nervous system, we close the day with choice, not chaos. We close it with reflection, not reaction. And your brain actually listens. It adapts. It adjusts how it catalogs the whole day. People think growth is about big moments, but most of it happens in tiny rituals like this. You want to feel more peace, more clarity, more direction. Start here. 10 minutes. End the day like it mattered. End it like you are shaping the story, not just reacting to it. And when you do this consistently, something incredible happens. Your baseline starts to shift. Your mood improves. Your memory softens. Your mornings feel lighter. Not because life got easier, but because your brain is no longer dragging around corrupted emotional files. You are closing loops. You are anchoring safety. You are telling the truth. Yes, today was messy, but here I am ending it with awareness. And that signal is powerful. It is a small thing. But it is not a small thing. It is 10 minutes that can decide how you feel about an entire day. Do not leave that part to chance. Take the reins. Rewrite the anchor. You deserve to feel peace at the end. Attention residue. You know that foggy feeling you get when you try to switch between too many things too fast. You close one tab and open another, but your brain still feels like it is stuck in the last thing. You forget why you walked into a room. You reread the same sentence 5 times. That is not laziness. That is not lack of focus. That is attention residue. And it is wrecking the way you think without you even noticing. Here is what is really going on. Your brain does not flip cleanly between tasks. It carries leftovers, like scent trails, emotional aftertastes, cognitive fragments from the thing you just did. So when you move from one thing to the next too quickly, part of your mind stays behind. It is still chewing on the last problem, still running simulations in the background. And that leftover attention corrupts the next moment. You are there, but not really there. This is why multitasking feels productive, but actually makes you dumber in the moment. Studies have shown it over and over. Even brief switches between tasks cause performance to drop, but worse than that, they cause memory to distort. You do not encode the experience as clearly. It gets foggy, fragmented, because memory loves presence. And multitasking kills presence. When you switch between tasks, your brain burns extra energy trying to suppress the last task. That suppression takes bandwidth. You are constantly cleaning up mental residue without realizing it. And if you do that all day long, your attention gets chopped into little bits and your memory ends up as a blur. Think of it like opening too many tabs on your browser. At some point, your system slows down, things crash, nothing loads right. But it is even worse with your brain because you are not just dealing with data. You are dealing with emotions, ideas, plans, judgments, and subconscious triggers. Each one leaves a trace, and those traces get tangled. Even just checking your phone for a few seconds in the middle of a deep task is enough to trigger attention residue. You might think you snapped back, but your brain is still partly reacting to what you just saw. That email, that text, that headline. It leaves a smear across your focus. And here is the kicker. Attention residue does not just affect the next few seconds. It affects how your brain stores the entire experience. Your hippocampus, which is responsible for memory encoding, cannot do its job properly when attention is fractured. So what you remember becomes incomplete, glitchy, out of order. That is why your days feel like a blur. You were never fully anchored in any moment. You want better memory, better clarity. You want to feel your life more vividly. You need to create cleaner transitions, not just stop doing a thing, but actually mentally close the tab. That means take a breath. Say to yourself, okay, that part is done. Even better, write one sentence to wrap it. Give the brain closure. Because when you do not close the loop, your brain keeps spinning it in the background like an open app, draining the battery. This is also why meditation helps memory, even though it has nothing to do with facts or repetition. It clears the residue. It gives your mind a moment to reset fully, not just pause, but release. And that reset is what allows full focus to return. You do not need to become a monk. You just need to stop pretending you are a machine. Humans are not meant to live in 15 open tabs. You are meant to be immersed, singular, engaged, and that does not just feel better. It works better. If you have ever wondered why your best ideas show up when you are doing nothing, when you are walking or showering or driving with the music low, that is because the residue is finally cleared. You are not reacting. You are receiving. You are not multitasking. You are metabolizing. So the fix is simple, but it takes nerve. Do one thing, just one, until it is done. And if you have to switch, take 5 seconds to let the last thing go. Do not drag it into the next task. You would not smear old paint over a fresh canvas. Your mind works the same way. Clean transitions, focused presence, gentle closures. That is how you rebuild the strength of your attention, and with it the clarity of your memory. This is not about doing less. It is about doing fully. Whatever you are doing, be there completely. Then leave it clean. Because your brain remembers how you showed up. And if you were only half there, you will only remember half the moment. The gap principle. Have you ever said something too fast and immediately felt dumber after? Like your mouth got ahead of your brain, and now you are just out there, trying to reel the words back in. That is the trap most people fall into. We rush to speak. We fill silence. We fear the pause. But the truth is the pause is power. There is a strange and sneaky psychology behind it. When you delay your response, even for a few seconds, your answer is judged as smarter. Not just because of what you say, but because of when you say it. This is the gap principle, the idea that timing creates perceived intelligence, not fake intelligence, not manipulation, but actual elevated insight because of one thing: space. Here is what most people miss. The brain craves closure. When a question is asked and there is no immediate answer, the mind of the listener opens up. It leans in. It starts imagining possibilities. And then when the answer finally comes, it lands harder. It sticks more. It feels like it came from depth, even if the words themselves are simple. Delaying your response forces your brain to process instead of react, and that alone upgrades the quality of what you say. But it also creates an effect in the mind of others. They assume you thought more. They assume there is more behind what you are saying. Silence is interpreted as depth, because very few people are comfortable with it. So when you are the one holding the pause, you instantly signal a kind of control. This is not about playing mind games. It is about resisting the pressure to perform. Most people treat conversations like a tennis match. Hit the ball back fast. Keep the rhythm. No gaps. But when you step out of that rhythm, you stop being predictable. You stop blending in, and your presence becomes weightier. Think about someone you respect, someone whose words land. They are not the ones talking the fastest. They are not the ones interrupting. They create space around their thoughts. They let the silence do half the work. Because the silence makes the mind curious, and curiosity sharpens attention. In fact, there are studies that show delayed answers are rated as more thoughtful and more accurate, even when the content is identical. Why? Because the pause tells the brain this person is choosing their words. They are filtering. They are not reacting on impulse. They are reflecting. And this works on yourself too. When you pause before speaking, you are more likely to override default responses. You catch the cliché. You stop the emotional knee-jerk. You open a tiny window where a better thought can step in. That moment, that gap, it is small, but it changes everything. It is not about being slow. It is about being deliberate. You can pause for 2 seconds and completely shift the energy of a conversation. You can pause and let someone else feel heard. You can pause and notice your own emotions before you spill them out. The pause becomes a tool, not a weakness, not a hesitation, a strategy. And the people who master it seem 10 times more intelligent, even if they are saying the same things as everyone else. Because they are doing it from stillness, not from scramble. Now here is where it gets even more interesting. When you use the gap, your brain actually builds stronger neural connections. Because the extra time lets different parts of your brain join the conversation, not just the speech centers, but memory, emotion, pattern recognition. You get a fuller response, a wiser one that resonates deeper with you and others. And yet we live in a world that rewards speed, hot takes, fast replies, constant stimulation. No wonder we are overwhelmed. No wonder we forget what we just said. There is no gap. There is no breath. We are just talking to talk. But the people who leave a beat before they speak, the ones who are not afraid of a pause, they are the ones whose words ripple. They are the ones who seem to know more, because they are not rushing to prove. They are choosing to land. So next time you are asked something, try it. Hold the silence, just for a moment. Let the pressure build. Let the question breathe, and then speak, not to react, but to respond. The gap is not emptiness, it is thought forming, it is wisdom waking up, and when you give it room, it will give you better words. Reality tunneling. It is wild how many things you believe right now that were never proven, never researched, never questioned. You just heard them enough times and your brain quietly checked the box that said truth. That is not stupidity. That is not laziness. That is reality tunneling, and it happens to every single one of us. Here is the uncomfortable part. Your brain does not care that much about what is true. It cares about what is familiar, and repetition makes anything feel familiar. That is how propaganda works. That is how rumors spread. That is how you can hear a lie enough times that it starts to feel like a memory. And once it feels like memory, your brain defends it, protects it, even rewrites other information to fit it. It sounds insane, but this is how the brain protects itself. It builds a tunnel, a tight little corridor of belief where everything outside gets filtered. Anything that agrees with what is already in the tunnel feels obvious, feels true. Anything that conflicts feels suspicious or wrong or annoying, not because it actually is, but because it does not match what the tunnel expects. This is not just about politics or media. It is about everyday thought. You repeat to yourself that you are bad at something. You say it over and over, maybe in your head, maybe out loud. Eventually your brain does not even question it. You feel it as fact. Even if there is no evidence, even if you have succeeded in that area multiple times, the tunnel blocks those memories. It highlights only the ones that confirm the script. Repetition is a strange kind of hypnosis. But you are not being hypnotized by someone else. You are hypnotizing yourself, thought by thought, word by word, until what you believe is less about reality and more about what you have heard the most. The scariest part is that this is how identities form, not through conscious decision, but through patterns. You say, I am always anxious. I never finish things. I am terrible at relationships. And every time you repeat it, your mind builds a stronger tunnel. It filters reality to support that script. Even if something new happens, even if the opposite is true, you miss it, because it is not part of the tunnel. The brain loves consistency, so it edits reality to feel consistent. That is the logic of the tunnel. And unless you interrupt it on purpose, it just keeps going. You get older. You collect experiences, but the tunnel stays narrow. It keeps playing the same story in your head, and you call it your personality. You call it your truth. But really, it is just repetition. Think about how brands advertise. They do not need to convince you with logic. They just need you to hear the same phrase enough times. Repetition creates comfort. Comfort creates belief. Belief creates action. You think you are making a rational choice, but your brain has already been primed. The same thing happens in relationships. Someone tells you you are difficult or needy or not enough. If they say it enough times, and you do not challenge it, it seeps in. And now, even when they are gone, the tunnel stays. You repeat it to yourself, and it keeps shaping what you see and how you act. But here is the flip side. The tunnel can go both ways. You can build new ones. You can repeat different words, different beliefs, and over time your brain will start to accept those too. You can say, I am learning to trust myself. I am building better habits. I am not my past patterns. And if you repeat that with the same conviction, it starts to take root. That is not delusion. That is design. That is using the same mechanism that built the first tunnel to dig a new one, a wider one, a tunnel that does not block the light out, but lets more in. You are not locked in, but you are influenced, heavily. And most of it happens without your awareness. So the move is not to panic. It is to notice. What story is on loop? What phrases are baked into your brain through nothing but repetition? And are they helping you? Or are they boxing you in? The people who seem the most confident, the most present, the most real, are not necessarily smarter. They just chose better loops. They repeated better beliefs, and their tunnel shows them a better version of reality, one that expands instead of shrinks. So ask yourself this. If my reality is shaped by what I hear most, what do I want to hear? And how can I start saying it? Even if I do not believe it yet, because belief does not come first. Repetition does. Persuasion. Most people think influence begins when you open your mouth, when you pitch, when you persuade. But the truth is the real game starts way earlier. Before you say anything. Before they even realize what is happening. That is the secret power of pre-suasion. Not persuasion, pre-suasion. The ability to shape attention before shaping opinion. It sounds subtle, but it is not. This is the mental back door. The trick is not in the message. It is in the moment before the message. Because that moment controls how the message is received. You can say the exact same thing to two people, same tone, same words, and get completely different reactions based on what came just before. Think about it. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift before anyone spoke? That is not magic. That is pre-suasion. Your brain is picking up signals, subtle cues, environmental hints, and those cues prime you to feel a certain way before the conversation even starts. Marketers use this all the time. They do not just sell a product. They create a frame, a vibe, a mental lane that tells you how to see what you are about to hear. They ask a question that pulls your mind in a certain direction. And once you are there, everything else they say makes more sense. Not because it is true, but because your attention was already moved into position. Persuasion is not just a tactic. It is a skill. And most people are completely unaware they are being moved. You can lead people to feel curious, or cautious, or open, or defensive, all without making an argument, all before a single claim is made. Because human brains do not just absorb facts, they absorb frames. You might think you are a logical person, but logic is never the first thing that shows up. Emotion comes first. Attention comes first. And once those are set, the rest just falls into place. So if you want to influence better, do not start by changing what you say. Start by changing what they are already focused on. There was a study where researchers asked people to fill out a survey about safety. Before they handed it out, they either showed the person a picture of a lock or a picture of flowers. The ones who saw the lock were twice as likely to say safety was important. Nothing was said. No speech. Just a tiny cue, and it shifted values. That is the invisible power of pre-suasion. The same thing happens in conversations. If you want someone to agree with you, do not jump into your points. Instead, ask a question that gets their brain into a yes state. Like, would you consider yourself someone who is open-minded? Most people will say yes. Now they are primed to act open-minded because they want to stay consistent with their self-image. You have not persuaded them yet, but you have already made it easier because the door is unlocked, and that changes everything. This works on yourself too. Before you try to solve a problem, ask yourself what mindset would solve this best. Curious, calm, strategic. Then find a way to get into that state before you think. You are not just changing your thoughts. You are changing the platform those thoughts will be built on. And here is where it gets weird. Your own brain is persuading you all the time, without asking. If you are tired or angry or distracted, your mind will grab whatever story fits that state, and you will believe it, not because it is accurate, but because it matches the frame you are already in. So the key is not just to control the content, it is to control the context. That is what the best communicators do. They do not fight the brain, they guide it. They know that attention is the real currency, and where attention goes, belief follows. The scary part is this works even when you are trying not to be influenced. Your mind is always absorbing cues, from tone, from lighting, from the first word in a sentence. So if you are not aware of it, you are probably being shaped by it. That is the default setting. But if you learn to notice it, use it, you can flip the whole thing around. You can walk into a room and guide attention without trying to dominate. You can start a conversation and quietly tilt it in the direction you want, not by controlling people, but by guiding their focus. Pre-suasion is not manipulation. It is alignment. It is learning how the mind works before it makes decisions. And once you get that, you do not need to push. You just need to point. The scarcity illusion hack. You do not need to change the thing itself to make it feel more valuable. You just need to change how it is seen. That is the magic of scarcity. And the twist is this: most scarcity is not real. It is manufactured. It is emotional. And it works instantly. Here is the hack. If something feels like it might disappear or become unavailable or even just get harder to reach, people want it more. Not because it changed, but because their brain did. Scarcity flips a mental switch. It triggers urgency. It activates the part of you that hates missing out. The part that says, if I do not grab this now, I will regret it later. Think about it. You see a product online. Looks decent, not amazing. But then you see only 2 left. Suddenly it feels important. You hesitate and the fear creeps in. What if it sells out? What if I lose this window? That fear is not about the thing. It is about the loss. And your brain treats potential loss like pain. Now here is the wild part. You can trigger that same response without lying or faking it. You can reframe anything by anchoring it to limitedness, time, access, energy. Not everything has to be rare, but it has to feel rare in the moment. And that moment is where the illusion becomes powerful. Scarcity is not about quantity. It is about perception. A book that sits on your shelf for months feels boring. But if you hear that your smartest friend swears it changed their life and only recommends it to a few people, it becomes magnetic. It is the same book. But now it feels like a secret, and secrets feel scarce. This applies to people too. Someone who is always available, always agreeable, always around loses shine. But the person who is selective with time, intentional with energy, who values their own space, that person becomes more compelling, not because they are playing games, but because their time feels valuable. And that perceived value transfers. Even ideas follow this logic. A concept you hear over and over starts to fade, but the one that shows up unexpectedly in the right moment, with the right tone, that one sticks. It feels rare, even if it is simple, even if it is old. Context creates scarcity, and scarcity shapes memory. You can test this right now. Imagine you were about to say something to someone, just a regular compliment. Now imagine saying it and then immediately walking away. No pause, no explanation. You just drop the line and disappear. That moment becomes unforgettable. Not because the words were perfect, but because the act felt rare. People remember what they think they cannot repeat. This is what most people get wrong. They think value is about how much something is, or how perfect it looks. But your brain does not work on spreadsheets. It works on tension, on risk, on emotional cost, and scarcity injects all of that in one shot. The crazy part is how easily this backfires if you do not understand the line. Push too hard and it feels manipulative. Push too often and it gets ignored. The real power is in subtlety. Let people feel the edge. Do not scream it. Whisper it. Suggest it. Let them do the math. Let them feel like they are choosing something rare. This is why limited time offers work. Why people chase tickets that are almost sold out. Why invites that are hard to get make people feel special. You are not just offering something. You are offering a moment that might vanish, and that changes everything. But you can also flip this inward. You can use scarcity to boost your own focus. Give yourself 5 minutes, no more, to make a decision. That boundary sharpens thought. Say to yourself, I only have 1 hour of creative energy today. Suddenly that hour feels premium. Scarcity turns time into currency, and you treat it with more care. So the next time you want to make something feel important, do not shout louder. Do not add more. Just remove access. Set a limit. Frame it as a disappearing window, or an invitation not everyone gets, and watch how quickly perception shifts. The hack is not about changing the thing. It is about shaping the moment. Scarcity is not the absence of more. It is the presence of meaning. And when something feels like it could slip through your fingers, your brain gives it all the value in the world. Thought suppression rebound. Try this right now. Whatever you do, do not think of a polar bear. Not a white one. Not a cartoon one. Not even a shadow of one. Just avoid it. Go ahead. What happened? The thought showed up anyway. Maybe even louder than normal. That is not a bug in your brain. That is the thought suppression rebound effect. The more you try not to think something, the more power you accidentally give it. This is one of the strangest and most frustrating loops your mind can fall into, and almost nobody teaches you how to deal with it. You are told to clear your head, let it go, stop thinking about it. But that advice usually backfires, because trying not to think about something is still thinking about it. The brain is not a delete button. It is a spotlight, and every time you aim that spotlight at a thought, even if it is to fight it, you are still lighting it up. You are still feeding it energy. That is how intrusive thoughts grow. Not because they are true, but because they are wrestled with, battled, replayed, rejected, over and over. Here is the trick your brain plays. It checks. Constantly. You say, do not think that. And your mind goes, okay, let me check to see if I am thinking it. Which brings it back again. Now you feel frustrated. You fight it harder. And boom, it is even louder. You are not solving the thought. You are circling it. Building a mental echo chamber around it without even realizing. And the thoughts that bother you the most are usually the ones that feel unacceptable. The what-ifs. The weird urges. The embarrassing memories. These are the ones you want to crush fast. Get rid of. Because they feel like a threat to your identity. But here is the truth most people do not want to hear. You are not your thoughts. You are the space they pass through. And not every thought needs a reaction. This is where everything flips. The real power move is not to fight the thought. It is to allow it, observe it, let it pass through without attaching meaning. Because the more you let thoughts just be thoughts, the less sticky they become. That is when they start to fade. Not because you forced them out, but because you stopped giving them fuel. It is like being in a room with music playing. You hear the song. It is there. But you do not have to dance to it. You do not have to turn up the volume. You just let it play and move on. That is how you train your brain to unhook. This is not about ignoring your mind. It is about learning how attention works. Thought suppression creates a pressure loop, and pressure makes things expand. But attention without judgment breaks that loop. It teaches the brain that not every thought is urgent. Not every internal sound needs to be turned into a story. Even science backs this up. In classic psychological studies, people told not to think of something ended up thinking about it far more often than people who were allowed to. The act of resistance became reinforcement. That is the trap. Resistance equals reinforcement. So how do you break out of it? One method is called labeling. When a thought pops in, you say to yourself, there is that anxious thought, or there is the urge to overthink again. Just label it, gently, like noting a cloud in the sky. No drama, no panic, just recognition. You are building distance. You are saying this thought is present, but it is not me. Another move is redirection, not by force but by focus. You shift attention to something concrete, your breath, the feel of your feet on the floor, the color of something in the room, something sensory, something present. This gives your mind something real to anchor to without needing to push the unwanted thought away. And finally, the weirdest, but most effective hack. You can intentionally exaggerate the thought in your head in a cartoonish way. Turn it into a silly voice. Imagine it shrinking down to the size of an ant. This diffuses its emotional charge. It tells your nervous system this is not danger. This is just noise, because that is what most thoughts are. Noise. Signals passing through. And just because they show up does not mean you have to salute them. Thoughts are not commands. They are not threats. They are not facts. They are events in the mind. And the moment you stop trying to silence them, the silence starts to grow on its own. The empty frame technique. There is a strange kind of power in saying nothing. Not silence exactly, but something more subtle, something more invisible. It is what happens when you speak without filling in the frame, when you present the shape of an idea without the content, and suddenly people start leaning in, trying to fill it for you. That is the empty frame technique. You give them the structure, the shadow, the shape of something important, but you never quite define it. You never say what it is directly, and people start projecting their own meaning into the space. That is where the power is, because the less you say, the more they imagine, and what they imagine feels personal, custom, true to them, even if it is vague. Most people think persuasion is about the right words, the perfect arguments. But sometimes the strongest message is the one you do not fully deliver. The brain cannot resist filling in gaps. When it sees an outline, it wants to complete the image. When it hears a story that pauses before the punchline, it starts writing the ending on its own. And once someone contributes to the idea, they become invested in it. They feel like they helped build it. That is emotional ownership. Politicians do this. Thought leaders do this. Good storytellers know exactly when to stop talking. Right before the part where the listener gets ahead of them. It creates a spark, a moment of subtle tension, where the person listening leans forward, just slightly waiting to connect the dots. And when they do, they feel like they discovered it. That is the win. That is where influence happens. Think about it. The most viral quotes are rarely complicated. They are open-ended. They hint at depth. They sound profound but leave space. That space is the frame. And what makes it powerful is that everyone sees something different in it. And no one wants to admit they do not get it. So they act like they do. Which means they internalize it even more. It is like saying, "You know what I mean," without ever saying what you mean. The other person nods because they want to stay in sync. They do not want to lose the thread, so they create meaning that works for them. And now they are emotionally connected to an idea you never actually spelled out. This works in conversations too. You do not have to argue to win. You can pose a question that has no easy answer, or point to a pattern without labeling it. You say something like, "There is a lot going on behind that," and then pause. That pause is the empty frame. It invites curiosity. It triggers reflection. It makes the other person think they are reaching a deeper level, even if you never went there yourself. It is almost like psychological aikido. You do not push, you just redirect, and by leaving space you let their own mind do the work. That is why this technique feels so strange at first, because it goes against everything we are taught. We are taught to explain, to define, to fill up the silence. But every time you over-explain, you kill the mystery. You close the door that curiosity was about to walk through. There is a moment in every good conversation where less becomes more, where saying one sentence and shutting up creates more impact than a 5-minute speech. You just have to be comfortable with ambiguity. You have to trust that the silence will speak louder than your voice if the frame is strong enough. But here is the part that really makes this powerful. It is not just about what you leave out. It is about what you suggest without confirming. That suggestion becomes an emotional blueprint. It plants an idea that feels like their own. And people fight to protect their own ideas. They carry them. They build on them. They believe in them more. This is not manipulation. This is awareness. It is knowing that people do not want to be told what to think. They want to be part of the discovery. So give them a frame. Make it feel important. But let them hang the picture themselves. And when they do, they will remember it forever. Not because you were loud. Not because you were brilliant. But because you left space for something that felt like theirs. That is the win. Behavioral momentum. You ever notice how hard it is to start something when you are stuck? Not because the task is impossible, but because your body feels like concrete. Your brain keeps finding reasons to wait, to pause, to start later. This is not laziness. This is physics, mental physics. There is a real force happening behind the scenes, and it is called behavioral momentum. It works just like real momentum. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion keeps moving. But here is where it gets weird. The size of the motion does not matter. Tiny movement still builds real momentum. That is where most people get it backwards. We think change has to be massive, that it has to feel epic, like quitting something cold turkey or waking up at 5 in the morning and transforming your entire life in 1 week. That mindset burns out fast because it is built on friction. It fights inertia too hard. The smarter move is to flip it. You start so small it feels almost ridiculous. Something you cannot fail. That is the ignition spark. 1 push-up, 1 sip of water, 1 email reply. The action itself is not what matters. What matters is that it changes your state. It signals your brain that movement has begun. And that little bit of movement changes the equation. Now your nervous system is more alert. Your decisions shift. You feel just slightly more in control. That is momentum. And momentum creates identity over time. Most people underestimate just how powerful this is. You do one small thing. It changes how you feel. That feeling makes you do another thing. And that second thing feels easier. So you keep going. It is a loop. But it works in both directions. If you stop for too long, you feel off. You hesitate more. You get stuck. The loop turns into a wall. Behavioral momentum is not about building discipline. It is about removing resistance. The resistance lives in the start. Always the start. That is the part your brain overthinks. So you bypass that by doing something so minor it feels silly. The trick is to lower the cost of beginning. Once you begin, the brain adapts fast. And here is the real power of it. When you build momentum, you get access to a version of yourself that is better at making decisions. You stop negotiating with every little task. You stop analyzing every next move. Your system clicks in. You start running patterns instead of battling through them. That is when change starts feeling smooth, natural, like part of who you are instead of something you are forcing. You can use this on anything: fitness, creativity, productivity, even emotions. If you feel anxious and you move just a little, even pacing in a room or changing the lighting or splashing cold water on your face, that is momentum. It shifts the chemistry just enough to start rewiring the mood. It works because your brain believes what your body does. And when you act in a way that signals progress, your brain gets on board. You are no longer trying to feel ready. You are just acting ready. And that redefines what you believe about yourself. One of the most underrated hacks is momentum stacking. You stack small actions back to back. Not because they are big, but because they are linked. Like making your bed, then drinking water, then stretching for 30 seconds. Each one creates a little dopamine bump. Each one reinforces that, hey, I am doing something. I am moving. That sequence becomes a habit chain. And those chains start pulling bigger habits behind them. What you want is to stop thinking in terms of outcome and start thinking in terms of energy direction. Where are you steering your attention? Where is your motion leading? It is not about the task. It is about the angle. You do not need a big win. You need forward tilt. That forward tilt is everything. The people who seem to have endless motivation are not stronger. They are just better at creating the first spark. They do not wait to feel like it. They trick the system by starting. And once they start, they shift into a different gear. That is what momentum gives you: a different gear, a sharper mind, a lighter body, a faster path to doing things you used to delay for hours. And the best part is this: you do not have to feel like you are crushing it. You just have to feel like you are moving. 1 inch is enough. One small action is all it takes to break the freeze and start the shift. That is how tiny habits turn into massive changes. Not all at once, but one move at a time, repeated with rhythm. That rhythm becomes identity, and that identity becomes your new baseline. Availability heuristic. You ever notice how the scariest stuff in life is not always the most likely? But it still owns you. You can hear about a plane crash once and suddenly every bump in the sky feels like the end. You see one news story about a random crime and now you are locking your doors 3 times. That is not logic. That is the availability heuristic hijacking your brain. The human mind is not a calculator. It does not do probability. It does story, emotion, memory. So when something is vivid or recent or dramatic, your brain moves it to the top of the list. Not because it is common, not because it is rational, but because it is available, easy to recall. That makes it feel important. And when something feels important, it starts guiding your decisions. This is how rare events control people, even if they almost never happen. One shark attack on the news, and people stop swimming. One story about food poisoning, and suddenly nobody trusts sushi. You can show them statistics all day. Does not matter. The brain does not care about statistics. It cares about impressions. What gets repeated gets remembered. What gets remembered gets believed. And belief is what drives behavior. This is why fear spreads faster than fact. Because fear feels more real, especially when you can picture it. When you can visualize the danger, your brain locks onto it. That picture becomes a shortcut. And that shortcut becomes your decision engine. And here is the shocking part. You are not just doing this with negative stuff. You do it with hope too. You see one story of a 20-year-old millionaire and suddenly your timeline feels behind. One viral video of someone traveling the world and your job feels like a trap. You feel like you are missing out. Even if the odds of that life are tiny, you still act like it is the new standard. That is availability too. Just in the form of fantasy, it gets worse. Because the more available something is in your environment, the more it warps your sense of truth. You are not judging the world. You are judging your bubble. If your feed is full of outrage, your brain assumes the whole world is burning. If your group chat is full of sarcasm, your mind assumes everything is fake. The content that surrounds you becomes your cognitive weather, and you start reacting to the climate inside your head instead of the reality outside your door. The availability heuristic is sneaky. It does not feel like distortion. It feels like intuition. It feels like you are just being smart, just staying safe, just being aware. But really you are looping. You are reacting to impressions you did not even choose. You are letting salience replace substance. And over time that makes you easier to influence, because all someone has to do is flood your brain with memorable stuff. Loud stuff. Emotional stuff. They do not need to be right. They just need to be unforgettable. This is how media works, how politics works, how marketing works. They are not trying to be accurate. They are trying to be sticky, because sticky wins, sticky spreads. Sticky shapes your mental menu, and you end up ordering from that menu even when the food makes you sick. But here is where it flips. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you realize your thoughts are often just echoes of what you have been exposed to, you start thinking differently. You pause. You ask, is this real or just repeated? Is this true or just recent? Is this my experience or just someone else's highlight reel? You can start reprogramming availability. You feed your mind better stories, more balanced inputs. You start noticing the stuff that does not shout, the quiet truths that do not go viral. And over time your inner weather changes. You get less reactive, less hijacked. You start judging based on patterns instead of one-offs. You regain your ability to see clearly, to choose wisely. This is not about ignoring the bad stuff. It is about putting it in perspective. So you are not making life choices based on what happens once in a million. You are building based on what happens every day. What really matters? What repeats in your life? Not just what explodes on a screen. The truth is your mind is constantly building a reality map. But if the only landmarks you allow are fear and fantasy, your map gets warped. So you correct it. You zoom out. You ask better questions. And you fill your mind with signals that reflect actual life, not just amplified noise. Because once you stop letting rare events rule your thinking, you start living in a world that feels clearer, calmer, closer to the truth. And that is when you get your power back. Default bias? You think you made that choice. But did you, really? Most people believe they are in control, that their decisions come from values, from logic, from goals. But half the time what they call a decision is just inertia. It is just the default option being accepted without question. And that little shortcut runs their entire life. Default bias is one of the quietest psychological forces there is. It hides inside simplicity, inside convenience. It tells your brain this option is already set up. It must be fine. It saves effort. And because your mind is wired to conserve energy, it nods along without a second thought. This is how people end up with the jobs they hate, the relationships they never chose, the habits they never questioned. It was not that they actively picked these things. It was that they never bothered to unpick them. They just followed the path that was already laid out. That path felt normal, and when something feels normal, it becomes invisible. Here is where it gets sneaky. The more options you face, the more likely you are to lean on the default, not because it is better, but because your brain gets overwhelmed. Decision fatigue kicks in, so you stop evaluating. You settle. You say, I guess this is fine, even if deep down it is not. Think about how often this shows up. When you sign up for anything, a plan, a product, a subscription, the default setting is already checked, and most people never change it, even if it costs more, even if it gives less. It is not about value, it is about friction, and the path of least resistance wins. Now zoom out. That same logic runs your identity. You are born into a system, a family, a culture, and those systems come with preloaded settings, beliefs, routines, expectations. If you do not question them, they become your operating system. And one day you look around and wonder why your life does not feel like your own. That is not failure. That is default bias, on autopilot. But here is what no one tells you. This bias is not just passive. It is weaponized. Marketers use it. Politicians use it. System designers use it. They know that most people will go with the flow, so they build the flow in their favor. They design the choice architecture to guide you toward what helps them, not what helps you. And the crazy part is you still feel like you chose, because it feels effortless, familiar. But that comfort is an illusion. It is a cage dressed as a couch. And once you see it, you start questioning everything, not out of paranoia, but out of clarity. You begin to notice that the first option is not always the best, that the standard path is not always your path, that the obvious answer might just be the most convenient for someone else. And that is when things get interesting, because now you are choosing from awareness instead of default. There is something powerful about pausing, about saying, hang on, why am I picking this? What assumptions are baked into this choice? Who benefits if I just go with it? That little moment of awareness is where your freedom begins. It does not mean you reject every default. It means you examine them. You make them earn their place. You might still choose the same job, the same city, the same routine. But now it is your decision, not just your programming. That switch changes everything, because you go from drifting to steering. Default bias is not a flaw. It is a function. It helps your brain survive in a complex world. But when survival is no longer enough, you have to upgrade. You have to replace automatic with intentional. That shift is subtle, but it is the core of every meaningful transformation. You do not need a full life overhaul. You just need to start spotting the defaults. In your habits, in your relationships, in your work. Ask, what am I blindly accepting? Where am I moving just because the track was already laid? And who laid it? Once you see the defaults, you can start designing new ones, better ones. You set your own standards, your own routines, your own priorities. You create defaults that reflect the life you actually want, not the one you were handed. And the moment you realize you have that power, everything begins to move. Not all at once, but in a new direction. a direction you actually chose. Temporal framing. If I told you that eating junk food would shorten your life by 5 years, you would probably nod and do nothing. But if I told you that same junk food would make you feel slow and foggy in the next hour, you might actually put it down. That is temporal framing in action. Your brain is way more sensitive to now than to later. It is not a logic thing. It is a wiring thing. The brain treats the future like a rumor and the present like a fire. The future is soft, abstract, blurry, but now is loud, sharp. It demands your full attention. This is why short-term pleasure crushes long-term planning. Why people say they want to save money but end up buying stuff they do not need. Why they say they want to get healthy but skip the workout the second it rains. They are not lying. Their brain just prioritizes now over later by default. This is not a character flaw. It is biology. In evolutionary terms, the immediate world used to be everything. Eat now or starve. Hide now or die. There was no guarantee of a tomorrow, so the brain evolved to chase short-term wins and avoid short-term threats. Long-term thinking only came much later. It had to be learned, cultivated. It does not come naturally, and this wiring still runs most of your decisions. You know future you wants to be better, fitter, smarter, calmer. But that version of you lives in a foggy distance. It feels more like a concept than a person. Meanwhile, present you is hungry, bored, tired, scrolling. That version has a megaphone, and it wins way more often than you want to admit. Here is where it gets interesting. The brain actually reacts to time like a trick mirror. If you frame something as happening now, it triggers urgency, energy, action. But if you frame it as something for later, the energy drops. Motivation thins out. You delay. You rationalize. You postpone your own growth. Marketers know this. That is why they always say limited time only. Act now. Doors close soon. They know that urgency flips a switch in your brain. It pulls the future into the present, and suddenly you are not deciding for later. You are deciding for survival. But what if you flipped that switch for yourself? What if you learned to reframe your goals using time? You stop saying, I will do this next week. You say, I am doing this today, or I am choosing not to. You make the deadline real. You put the reward in reach. You collapse the distance between now and the result, or go the other way. If something tempts you now, stretch the frame. Play the tape forward. That extra drink, that petty reply, that cheap dopamine hit. Ask where it actually leads. Most impulses look way less sexy when you look at them from an hour later, a day later, a month later. That distance gives you control. This is how you hack temporal framing. You shorten the reward window for good habits. You lengthen the pain window for bad ones. You shrink goals down to now. You stretch temptations out to their consequence. You use time as a lever, not a lie. Even the way you talk to yourself changes this. Instead of saying, I will start eating better soon, say, I am either fueling or draining myself today. Instead of, I will start saving next month, say, every dollar I spend now is a vote for broke me. Make it immediate. Make it visceral. Your brain responds to that. Because the truth is, time is not neutral. It is not just a background condition. It is an emotional filter. Frame something as urgent and it feels meaningful. Frame it as later and it feels optional. That is why nothing changes until the deadline is real. Until the mirror gets held up. Until you finally say enough. So if you are stuck, stop blaming motivation. Start shifting the frame. Start seeing later as now. Not in some fake hustle way, but in a grounded, clear way. The version of you want to become does not exist in the future. They exist in your next choice. Not next year, next hour, because the gap between who you are and who you want to be is not measured in years. It is measured in nows, one after another, until later becomes now, and now becomes yours. Idea contagion. You do not catch an idea because it makes sense. You catch it because it sticks, it spreads. It hits you at the right moment in the right mood, and before you even ask if it is true, you are already nodding along. That is idea contagion. Beliefs are not adopted like math problems. They are caught like colds. Someone around you believes something with enough certainty, enough emotion, enough repetition, and your brain lowers its guard. You start absorbing without thinking. Not because you are weak, because you are human. We are social creatures long before we are rational ones, and the brain is wired for belonging. Agreement is safer than resistance. Mimicking is faster than analyzing. So when a belief travels through a group you trust, it does not feel like persuasion. It feels like truth echoing. Now here is what most people do not see. Logical beliefs spread slowly. Viral ones spread fast. Because virality does not care about evidence. It only cares about how easy something is to remember, to repeat, to feel. So a complicated but true idea gets ignored, while a catchy but false one goes everywhere. Emotion beats logic, always, especially fear, especially anger. That is why panic spreads faster than facts. That is why conspiracy theories grow stronger when people feel uncertain. Not because they are proven, but because they offer emotional closure. They give people a story that makes the chaos feel explainable. You think beliefs are a sign of thinking. Sometimes they are just a reaction to discomfort, a shortcut, an escape hatch. And once an idea reduces your uncertainty even a little, your brain starts defending it. Not because it is correct, but because it felt good to believe it. This is why echo chambers exist. Not because people are stupid, but because people are wired to reinforce what already feels familiar. When you hear something repeated enough, it gains weight. Not truth, just weight. It becomes easier to keep than to question. And that is where idea contagion gets dangerous. Because once a belief spreads through a tribe, questioning it feels like betrayal. You are no longer just rejecting a thought. You are rejecting your group, your identity, your belonging. So you stay quiet. You nod along, and the virus spreads. This is how entire cultures build invisible rules. How entire generations inherit ideas they never chose. This is how people carry beliefs that limit them, shame them, scare them. Beliefs that were never examined, just absorbed. Now here is the twist. You are not immune. Even the smartest people catch ideas emotionally before they evaluate them intellectually. In fact, intelligence can make it worse. Because the more clever you are, the better you are at rationalizing the belief you already wanted to accept. But that does not mean you are helpless. It just means you need to become a belief detective. Not paranoid, just curious. You start asking, where did this idea come from? Who benefits if I believe this? Does this still serve me? Or did it just sneak in through repetition and emotion? One of the fastest mental upgrades you can make is this. Learn to separate how true something feels from how true it actually is. Because feeling true is just a side effect of familiarity, repetition, emotion, authority, none of which equal accuracy. Ask yourself how many of your current beliefs you actually chose. How many did you investigate? Test, challenge. How many came from someone else's fear, or pain, or agenda? If the answer is most of them, welcome to being human. But awareness changes the game. Once you start seeing beliefs as contagious, you stop treating them as sacred. You start seeing them as patterns, scripts, Mental downloads. Some are useful, most are outdated, and the second you become aware of that, you can start uninstalling what no longer fits. This does not mean walking around second, guessing everything. It means staying awake. Watching what spreads. Watching why it spreads. Watching how it makes you feel before you think. Because every time you hear something and feel the urge to agree immediately, that is your signal. Pause. Zoom out. Ask who else believes this, and who started it. Ideas are powerful, but not because they are always true, because they are sticky, and the ones that spread fastest are not always the ones that serve you. Choose your inputs carefully. Your mental immune system depends on it. Mental image pollution. Everyone keeps telling you to visualize success. Picture it, see it, feel it. But nobody talks about what happens when you overdo it. When you spend more time imagining than doing. When your brain gets so satisfied with the fantasy that it stops chasing the reality. That is mental image pollution. And it is real. Here is the twist. Visualizing your goal can actually reduce your chances of achieving it, not increase them. Because your brain does not always know the difference between a vivid image and an actual experience. If the visualization is strong enough, it gives you the reward feeling without the work. That tiny dopamine hit makes you feel like you have made progress, even when you have not moved at all, and that is the trap. You dream it, you replay it, you feel amazing. You start thinking, yeah, this is inevitable. But because you already got the feeling, your motivation quietly drops. You tricked your own brain into thinking the job is done. But nothing in your real life has changed. This is not just a theory. Studies have shown that people who visualize success without also planning the steps are less likely to follow through. The mental images become a substitute for movement. And over time, that substitution becomes a habit. You become a master at imagining instead of executing. Now the images start stacking. You imagine the perfect body, the perfect day, the perfect version of yourself walking through a perfect life. And each new image adds another layer. A fog of ideal outcomes. A cloud that gets thicker and thicker. And buried under all that fantasy is your actual ability to act. You are not lazy. You are overloaded. Your mental space is jammed with too many polished previews, too many imaginary wins, and that internal cinema starts to wear you down. Because every new image is a reminder of what you have not done yet. What you are still not living. And that gap creates guilt. The very thing that was supposed to motivate you ends up paralyzing you. The problem is not imagining a better life. The problem is only imagining it. Without friction, without mess, without sweat, without failure. That kind of vision is just wishful thinking in disguise, and your brain learns to crave the clean version more than the real one. There is also this. Every time you visualize a perfect outcome, you unconsciously create fear. Fear of ruining it. Fear of starting and not matching what you saw. So you delay. You wait for the perfect mood, the perfect timing, because anything less feels like failure before you even begin. Mental image pollution is not about having dreams. It is about drowning in them, letting the images replace the effort. Getting addicted to the idea of momentum instead of the work it takes to generate it. So how do you fix it? You stop visualizing only the win, and you start imagining the work, the grind, the boredom, the rejection. You see yourself sweating, failing, getting back up, and doing it again. You normalize the mess. You picture the process, not just the prize. Because that is what actually builds momentum. When your mental images match the terrain of reality, not just the highlight reel. when you can feel the discomfort and still move forward anyway. That is when visualization becomes fuel, not fantasy. You also limit the number of images. You stop creating endless perfect futures. You zoom in. One image, one outcome, one clear path. No more cinematic montages, just the next step, over and over again, until it becomes real. And most importantly, you stop treating the image as the goal. You treat it like a compass, a direction, not a destination. Because the second you start worshiping the image, you stop walking toward it. You end up stuck inside your own daydream. Mental clarity is not about thinking more. It is about thinking cleaner, sharper, less polluted. You get rid of the extra visions, the duplicates, the distractions. You clear out the fantasy fog so your real actions have room to breathe. Because action lives in the space between the images, in the silence between imagined applause, in the quiet seconds when nobody is watching. And you are doing it anyway. So the next time your brain starts building a picture, perfect version of success, interrupt it. Break it. Ask, what does this look like at 5 a.m. when I do not feel like it? What does this look like when it is hard, when it is slow, when it is not glamorous? That image is worth holding on to, because that one leads somewhere real. The concept decay trick: some ideas rot slower than they should. You have a dumb thought, a useless opinion, a half-baked plan that should be gone by now. But it sticks around. Weeks pass, months even, and it is still in there, taking up space. This is the danger of concept decay. And most people have no idea it is even happening. Not all bad ideas show up wearing a clown suit. Some look smart at first. They make sense in the moment. They feel clever or even profound. But over time they turn toxic. They lose meaning. Or worse, they start blocking better thoughts. But because they once made sense, your brain protects them, even when they stop serving you. Now, here is the twist. Your brain does not automatically delete bad ideas. It recycles them. If you do not actively let a concept fade, it keeps looping in the background, quietly influencing your choices, coloring your beliefs, making you defend things you do not even believe anymore. That half-true philosophy you picked up in college, that opinion you built around a feeling instead of a fact, that rule you made when you were afraid, they all keep living inside your mental space like squatters, taking up cognitive rent without paying in clarity. And if you do not update them, they rot, not loudly, quietly, in a way that slowly skews your judgment, slows your growth, or worse, becomes part of your identity. And once a thought becomes identity, it is almost impossible to kill. Here is why this happens. The brain is biased toward consistency. Once it invests in an idea, it does not want to waste the effort. So it doubles down. It starts collecting proof to keep the belief alive, even if the idea no longer fits your life. This is why it is easier to keep thinking the wrong thing than to admit you outgrew it. But imagine if you built in a decay mechanism, a way to let bad ideas naturally fade unless they prove their worth again. What if every belief, every assumption, every mental model had an expiration date, not based on time, based on usefulness? If it stops working, it stops living. That is the concept decay trick. You do not wait for thoughts to rot. You build a mental system that gently tests them, exposes them, lets them die if they fail to evolve. You give your brain permission to clean house, to let go without guilt. This is not about doubting everything. It is about making space. Space for better thinking, clearer frameworks, ideas that match who you are now, not who you were 5 years ago. Because every time you release a dead thought, you make room for one that can actually help you move. So how do you do this? You ask better questions. You stop asking, is this true, and start asking, is this still useful? You stop defending ideas and start updating them. You notice the ones that feel heavy, the ones you keep repeating but do not really believe. Those are the ones ready to go. You also stop treating every idea like a child. Not everything you think deserves protection. Some thoughts are just guests. Let them come and go. Let them expire naturally. Do not turn them into furniture. And here is the powerful part. The more you let bad ideas decay, the faster your brain gets at it. It builds a rhythm, a quiet background process that sweeps your mental space. You become lighter, sharper, less attached. You stop dragging outdated thinking into every new chapter of your life. This is what smart thinkers do. They evolve their thoughts faster than they fall in love with them. They are not loyal to their last opinion. They are loyal to progress. And they do not confuse certainty with wisdom. So the next time you find yourself clinging to a belief, just because you have had it for a while, pause. Ask yourself if you would still choose that thought today. Or are you just letting it stay because it got there first? You do not owe your brain a museum. You owe it a workshop. Ideas are tools, not treasures. Use them, sharpen them, and throw them out when they go dull. Because the only thing worse than having a bad idea is holding on to it long after it stopped being useful.